Hello, everyone. Welcome to the specially called meeting for Friday, June the 28th. We have a full agenda today, lots on the schedule, and we'll begin with the roll call. Ms. Hilbert, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilman Kidder?
Here.
Councilwoman Butler?
Present.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
Mayor Crocker?
Here.
And
With-
Mr.
Oh, sorry,
Mayor
go
Pro
ahead.
Tem Young will not be joining us today.
Thank you. If you would please rise, join me for the pledges and a moment of silence.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor this flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. All right, so we'll jump right in. As I mentioned, we have a full schedule. Certainly, given that, however, I want to make council, or I guess acknowledge and make sure that, while we do have a full schedule, that I don't want to deter anyone from asking questions, asking for follow-up information and things like that on the various presentations we'll get. So I want to make sure everybody gets the information they need today. And with that, we'll move straight into B1, which is announcements and reminders. Good morning, Mr. Garza.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We do not have any for you today.
I'm hoping the same is true for public and employee recognitions.
It is.
Perfect. Any items from council?
Can I get my minute back?
You cannot. All right, no items from council, then citizens' communication is item B4. I have no cards. Is there anyone that would wish to take 3 minutes to address council at this time? Seeing no one, we will jump right into the work session, and Mr. Garza, I will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Yeah, we're starting on a good foot here. All right, so do I use the mouse or is there a clicker? Okay, thank you. Okay, well, good morning. Welcome to another year of talking about our budget. As you know, what we will talk about today is strictly a preliminary budget, and I will hit on the schedule a little bit later. But please keep in mind that at this stage of the process, this is strictly preliminary. Everything that you'll hear today is where we are as of now. And we will be working on finalizing the proposed budget for the rest of this month. But again, more on that a little bit later. Every year, we like to try and focus the overall budget story on some key categories. I won't spend too much time into these categories on this slide because it'll speak for itself as I go through the presentation. But I do want to spend a minute quickly talking about the economy because I don't have slides related to this topic. But as you know, and we've discussed and I've presented before on this idea that we expect certain revenues to begin to plateau, specifically property tax and sales tax over the course of the next few years. And so we want to be sensitive and mindful to that going into this proposed budget of fiscal year 25. I'll say now that some of the figures that we'll share may or has the potential to maybe give the wrong impression about what I just verbalized, because we are proposing an increase in sales tax revenue compared to last year, and we will propose a tax rate that generates more revenue into our general fund. But I'll caveat that the reasons why we're able to see those increased revenues have more to do with the fact of how we've budgeted conservatively historically and paying off debt early, and I'll explain that later, as opposed to community growth. And so just keep that in mind as we go through it. Now, I want to also be mindful of the fact that we have two new council members who are seeing this flow of the presentation for the first time. And this flow of the presentation is consistent with the way that it typically is every year. And so we always focus on a big picture perspective of the budget, and then we delve into the specific funds, general fund, utility funds, hotel tax fund, et cetera. And then we'll have an opportunity, or you'll have an opportunity to hear from each director and chief about their individual budgets and get to learn more about what their departments do, what they've done, and what they plan to continue to do. And I think that is important because oftentimes, if you just talk about numbers without the context of what are people actually doing with that money, it can get a little bit trickier to understand, why we have the budget that we have, why we have the personnel that we have. And so from my perspective, it's always been a priority for the last 5 years that I've been here to ensure that we tie those two things together and talk about it at the same time, especially for folks that might be tuning in on TV for the first time, understanding, well, what are these people doing with our money? And so when the directors and the chiefs talk about their presentations, I hope that helps explain that a little bit better. But going into the preliminary budget for fiscal year 25, we are, as of now, standing at 193 million. This chart here in the middle represents the three larger areas that we focus on, one of them being governmental funds. We added an explanation of each there for the benefit of those new folks that aren't as familiar with these terms. But the governmental funds are used to account for activities supported by taxes, grants, and similar revenue sources. Our enterprise funds are goods and services to the public for a fee. So think of the utility fund, environmental services fund in that category. And then we have internal service funds that provide goods and services to our internal departments. Now, one thing that sticks out right off the bat, of course, is the size of the budget. Fiscal year 24 was roughly 260 million. And so right off the bat, we know we're going into fiscal year 25 with a significantly lower budget, predominantly driven by not having as large of a CIP, but I'll get into that a little bit later. On the revenue side, currently we're projecting $184 million in revenues for fiscal year 25. And if you're asking, well, wait a minute, you just said you have $193 million in expenditures. How does that make sense if you're only projecting $184 million in revenues? Every year, we have an opportunity to utilize excess fund balance, or what we refer to as working capital, to help offset and to help pay for one-time expenditures the subsequent year. And so on the bottom right of this slide, we showcase where that difference, which is $9 million, is coming from and where we anticipate it coming from. And I've got a few slides later that further make the point, but in essence, this provides an opportunity for us to, with the savings, if I can call them that, or additional revenue that perhaps was unexpected in fiscal year 24, we're able to utilize those funds in fiscal year 25 for one-time expenditures, and that helps us out quite a bit. And every year, there's an opportunity to do that. On the left-hand side of this slide, we can see the breakdown of the different funds. Of course, as is customary, our largest fund, which is the one at the bottom of that bar, is our general fund, followed by our construction fund, which again is significantly reduced compared to fiscal year 24, and then our utility fund. We normally like to point out that in our budget, not all funds are created equal, because not all funds can just be transferred from one fund to another and utilized just for whatever we want. Many of these funds have some restrictions attached to them or some limitations, and so it's important to keep that in mind as we proceed through the conversation. Nevertheless, the largest and most important fund, if I can call it that, is our general fund, since that is the one that pays for our essential services, public safety, administration, public works, parks, et cetera. And so that's highlighted on the right-hand side with this pie chart. And budget wheel is typically what I like to call it, because the outside part of this pie chart showcases the revenues that are projected for the general fund, and then the inside are the expenditures. I've got a slide later on in the presentation that takes a deeper dive into the general fund, and so for now, I'll just leave it at that our general fund is $61 million going into fiscal year 25. And public safety services represents 57% of that, which for us, that's police, fire, and municipal court. So let's talk a little bit more details about the revenue. I mentioned the $184 million in revenue for fiscal year '25, significant decrease, $65 million decrease compared to fiscal year '24. We typically show these differences with this particular chart, like the one that is at the bottom of this slide. It's pretty self-explanatory, but in essence, the items that are flowing to the left or in red are the items that have been reduced, comparatively speaking, to the previous fiscal year, and the items in blue heading towards the right of this are the items that are an increase, comparatively speaking, to fiscal year '24. And so in essence, as I alluded to earlier, one of the biggest changes is that we don't have as rich of a CIP going into fiscal year '25. And so you notice that the three items at the bottom, which total $67 million, all speak to that, as well as grants. And then the items in blue highlight the increased sales tax revenue that we're projecting, the increased property tax revenue that we're projecting, and other revenue from BSTDC, and I'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about property tax revenue. It's always one of the biggest items of interest, and rightfully so. If you would have asked me 2 months ago, or even just a month ago, how are things looking, we would have conveyed a significantly different picture, because much of the information we were getting from the appraisal district, literally up until just a few weeks ago, had us significantly with less values for fiscal year '25 compared to '24. However, the last few weeks, we've seen a big turnaround with that. And so where we sit today is about roughly 2.9% increase to the positive in our NTAV. This makes the conversation about the tax rate a lot easier, and I'll talk about that here in the next few slides. But just really quickly, a couple highlights on this particular slide. So you'll notice that there's roughly $1 billion still under protest. That's significant. And so we expect that number to go down over the course of the next month before tax rolls become certified. That may impact where we end up landing on our net taxable appraised values. But for now, we're sitting at 2.9. And so the scenarios that I'll point out on the tax rate on the next slide are strictly assuming that 2.9 and assumes that stays as that. The other thing I'll point out is a negative number under the TERS captured value. That was definitely a surprise for us and something that we needed probably to take a deeper dive to understand why it was that these values within the TERS are experiencing a negative number, since the whole point of the TERS is to capitalize on gains and that incremental gain. And obviously, if there isn't one, then there isn't much money going into the TERS. So that's something that we're going to take as a homework item to do a little bit more research on why that is. But nonetheless, overall, the big takeaway is that we're now forecasting a positive increase in our NTAV going into the proposed budget. And again, this might look different and will look different once we receive the certified tax rolls at the end of July. One thing too that we always like to point out is the new improvements aspect of it. And so for new improvements, it's accounting for roughly $37 million or $172,000 in revenue and new improvements. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit further on this slide. And so if you're wondering, well, what would be the proposed tax rate if what you just said was certified and those were the actual numbers? And so as it sits right now, if we were to have that 2.9 increase in NTAV, we would be proposing, in essence, the equivalent of the voter approval tax rate, which is 0.4771. Currently, the tax rate is 0.4898, or just shy of 49 cents. What we're proposing is a decrease in the tax rate of, in essence, a penny and a quarter, or 0.0127. These terms have changed thanks to SB 2, but you'll notice that the no new revenue tax rate is 0.4748, and the voter approval tax rate is 0.4771. So the voter approval tax rate is less than the current tax rate, but is also the max the tax rate can be before an automatic election is triggered. And so we are, in essence, proposing a max tax rate to generate as much revenue as possible due to the reasons I described earlier related to the economy, but also to take advantage of the decrease on the debt rate. You'll notice at the top of this chart or table that the debt rate is being proposed to be reduced by 0.0139. And if we work our way all the way to the bottom of this slide, we can kind of walk through what this means in real numbers. And so for the general fund, we've got $106,000 of new money for the general fund caused by new improvements. I just got done mentioning the $37 million in new value that is the $172,000 in revenue for new improvements. Of course, as you know, our property tax rate is in two parts, M&O and INS. And so on the M&O side, that's the 106 or 107. Then on the existing values front is a little bit over $500,000 for a total of $608,000 of additional revenue into our M&O for our general fund. But please note that the bulk of that is coming from a movement of that money being in the INS side of the house to the M&O side. And this is huge because we've talked in the past about, well, what are the benefits of paying off debt early? We've also talked in the past about the unintended consequences of SB2, and that SB2 penalizes you if you shift money from the debt rate to the M&O rate. And in this particular year, going into fiscal year 25, we're going to see real life examples of the benefit of paying debt off early, but also the consequence of shifting money from one side to the other side. So on the bond redemption side, we typically focus the conversation on, well, it's good to finish paying off debt early because it saves money because you're paying less interest, right? That goes without saying. But it frees up, so to speak, additional debt sooner. Well, one of the benefits of also paying off debt early is that it allows us the ability to lower the INS rate to a greater degree or maybe even sooner than was originally anticipated, right? Because we don't need as much money going into our debt fund if we're finishing paying off debt sooner, right? In this particular year, that is creating this opportunity for us to shift money from the debt rate to the M&O rate, and thus creating the opportunity to decrease the tax rate. Because if we did not have the shifting of that money from the debt rate or the debt side to the M&O side, then we absolutely would be talking about an increase to the tax rate. But that's not the case, thanks to our good practices of paying debt off early. So just keep that in mind moving forward.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So just to be clear, you're saying that there's a decrease in the property tax rate, but there, and maybe Mr. Reyna can help me understand it better, it looks like there is, in fact, some increase based on how property taxes would align with that, because there's the no new tax rate, no new revenue tax rate, but it clearly says that it's a small percentage higher there.
Right. Yeah, and that difference there is the difference between the no new revenue tax rate and the voter approval tax rate. And so in essence, what we're suggesting is that we're proposing a tax rate that will generate more money. And I have in a couple of slides, I'll show a diagram that shows this dichotomy of when you have increase in values, and I'll just go to it now. But when you have an increase in values, it provides the opportunity to lower the tax rate while at the same time generating additional revenue at the aggregate level. And so if you notice on the last 3-4 years of this particular chart, you'll notice where they intersected, and we're in essence going in this sort of sideways V, if you will, where we're on this path now where we're seeing increased revenue, which is the yellow line, with the dashed line, which is a decreased property tax rate. And that's part of what happens when your tax base is growing. And so oftentimes people ask, well, other communities have a lower tax rate than Victoria. Well, that's probably so, but that's because they started this movement, 10, 15 years ago, because they experienced growth to a greater degree than what we did. And so it's sometimes it's challenging, not challenging, but it can be confusing, for folks to, I guess, understand how it's possible to decrease the tax rate but also increase revenue. But that's exactly what happens when you have an increase in property values at an aggregate level. And that's exactly what's happened the last 3 or 4 years. And what also makes that a little bit more challenging to explain is that when we talk about it at our level here at the city, it's impossible for us to account for every single individual property owner situation, because I'm sure we all know people's values that went up significantly, some that went down, some that stayed flat, some that only went up a little bit, right? And so we don't have the ability to make a decision that impacts everybody equally the same. And so all we have to go off of is the aggregate increase. And I mentioned, for example, that our aggregate increase is 2.9. Typically, 75% of that increase is due to residential. And so we, in this scenario, assume a 2.2% increase in value of somebody's property or house. And you could see how under this scenario, people would actually pay less in property taxes under the reduced property tax rate. Now, of course, if somebody's property in value went up 10% or 5% or 7% or went up higher than the average aggregate that we work with, then yeah, they'd end up paying some additional property tax revenue, and that's where we receive the additional tax revenue that we're projecting. Which is, yes, sir.
In properties that, larger properties that are rolling off of abatement programs, I think also impact that V that you're talking about. And
They, go for it. I know you want to say something.
All the time. 2 points. We don't have any abatement here,
okay.
but 2 years ago when Calipito came off, it just popped up. We had a $50 million increase. Ms. Butler, on the other comment, just keep it more simple. Whenever your appraised values go up, automatic your calculation will bring your tax rate down, no matter what it is, okay? But in this case, you had $34 million of new improvements, had never been taxed before. It's mainly the increase you're getting. Because a no new tax rate does not include no new improvements at all. Does that make sense? Okay.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Which is why communities that experience growth year over year are able to bring in significantly more revenue than a community that isn't growing as much, because the limitations that the state puts out on property tax revenue don't apply to new valuations. And I'll actually speak a little bit more to that on Tuesday, but more on that later. I hope that helped.
It does. I just want to be well-informed, and I think it helps then when our citizens are listening to understand that, because they may hear we're decreasing the tax rate, and yet they see that the amount that they pay either remains the same or increases based on
Right, or
what we
decreases.
talked about, or decreases.
right.
But to be fair, the understanding there, I think, needs to be
Sure, yeah,
shared.
Another key point, if I may.
yes.
When we do this calculation, people have to understand, we don't identify each particular, it's a lump sum. And you put it into this calculator, and this is what happens. Just because the overall appraisal comes out to be 3%, 4%, it doesn't mean that every house is going to hit with 3 or 4. It depends on their situation and where they're at. But for our purposes, there's no way we can identify that. But so it's a whole number. The appraisal district doesn't identify each household
Right.
per se, just give it, here's the number. So I don't know if that helps too.
No, it definitely helps. And like I said, I just wanted to better understand it and then also have the opportunity to kind of explain it for, if someone were to ask us as council members, hey, it says this, but it feels like I'm paying more. I want
Right.
to be able to explain it. in
Yeah,
detail, so.
and typically that's a fair point, and typically when I get asked the question, my first response is, well, it depends, right? Because it depends how much their appraisal changed, and so if it went up very minimally, they won't see an impact, right? If it decreased, they're actually going to pay less property taxes, right? But if it increased significantly, then yeah, they're going to end up paying some more property taxes because the value went up just too much, right?
If I may.
Yeah.
Well, this probably won't be my last time, I'm sorry. You have other taxes entity too that makes up that bill. Keep in mind, it's not only the city of Victoria, county, college, et cetera, et cetera. And some houses might have to pay, frozen properties too. I mean, their values might be frozen. So they might see a raise in the property value, but they're not gonna pay any more than they did prior years. So that's misleading too as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about the other taxing jurisdictions, because we can't control what the other taxing jurisdictions do. And so, you know, if we're proposing a tax rate that, let's say, at least for our purposes, decreases their payment to the city or keeps it flat or whatever, that may not be the case with, you know, other taxing entities, right? And so, I think that's a great point. So thank you, Gilbert. But I'm gonna any other questions on the property taxes on where that sits today? Okay, thank you, Mark. So I'll move on to sales tax receipts. So you're going to hear me talk quite a bit this cycle of the budget process, talking about taking revenue risk, and this highlights that pretty significantly. And so you'll notice at the bottom right of this table that we're proposing $19 million in revenue in sales taxes for fiscal year 25, and are projecting that we finish fiscal year 24 at roughly just $100,000 more than that. Now, you'll notice that we budgeted very conservatively for fiscal year 24 in $18.3 million. And this is what I'm referring to when I reference sort of that this might give the impression that our economy is growing, because we're going to actually change our budget to reflect an additional $700,000 in sales tax revenue. But that's more of a product of the fact that we budgeted conservatively in fiscal year 24. In reality, that $19.1 million that we expect in 24 is not that much higher than the actual compared to, well, let me backtrack. We've seen a decrease in sales tax revenue, right? Hence my comments in the past about plateauing revenues. So you see that in fiscal year 23, the actual was 20 million. You see in 2022, it was 19.3. Now, going into fiscal year 24, we could have very easily ridden the wave and actually projected significantly higher increases in sales tax revenue. Many cities did. And on Tuesday, I'm actually going to share some headlines, because some cities are actually put in a pretty significant pinch right now because they didn't do that. But the point is, we're this year, we're seeing that trend go down. And so nonetheless, we feel comfortable taking this revenue risk. And again, that's the way that I've been calling it, and projecting and putting in the budget that 19 million for fiscal year 25. So to be clear, we're projecting and putting in this budget an additional $700,000 in sales tax revenue. But again, that is not a product of necessarily our economy growing and doing better. It's more of a product of the fact that we were so conservative in fiscal year 24 that we now are able to take that revenue risk and increase that, because we need to, because of what we're trying to pay for in the next couple of fiscal years. And I'll get to that later. So moving on, overall, I'm going to fly through some of these for sake of time, but I've already mentioned that the CIP will look completely different in fiscal year 25, and thus a lot of red on this particular slide. And so I'm just going to move on. The grants are also decreasing by 9 million, predominantly driven, excuse me, by us not receiving this ASR grant through TDM. We had accounted for some money in fiscal year 24, assuming we might get that grant. At this point, I've lost count of how many grants we've applied for that ASR well, but we keep trying to no avail. But that's coming off the books. We also, the CDBG MIT, I know some of you were really involved with that effort with the Regional Planning Commission. I know Mark was really involved with that effort. But that's decreasing a little bit simply just because of the timeline of when we're utilizing some of those funds. And Mark, I know you had asked about grants. And so in this particular slide, you can see how our other grants are actually increasing slightly. And we list them out there. And Mark requested for the department heads, when you present your budgets, that if any one of these grants happens to be in your department, to mention it. So there, Mark, I told him. Okay, thank you.
I just want taxpayers to know that we're trying to get every dollar we can.
That's right. Okay, so on the expense side, I mentioned 193 million. and how that's a $63 million decrease compared to fiscal year '24. Of course, there's going to be similarities on both the revenue and the expense side in terms of what's changed. And of course, what's changed significantly on the expense side, of course, is that we don't have as big of a CIP. And hence, all of the red on the bottom in the categories of CIP. And you'll notice that in blue, the most significant increase is on personnel. And so we'll talk a little bit about the pay program, but the bulk of the increase in next year's budget is going towards our people, towards personnel. And when I go through the sample budget story, I'll highlight how we're actually highlighting that a little bit differently going into this next year to make it an even greater point for everybody to understand how much money we invest in our people, and rightfully so. At the second meeting in May, we discussed the CIP. I'm not going to go through the CIP in detail. That's why we typically sort of cover that before we get into these meetings, because as you know, that talking about the CIP could just have us talking about the CIP for a long time. This is simply just to highlight that variance that I've been alluding to a couple different times, that the biggest difference between next year's budget and this year's budget is not having such a large CIP. Of course, the public safety building is coming off. The residential streets is decreasing. One of the things to point out is that the relationship between utilities and streets typically fluctuates. And so we typically go through cycles where some years we invest more in utilities and some years more in streets because of this methodology and our approach to tackle utilities before we tackle streets. And so, for example, fiscal year 2023, saw a high utility number because that was the year that we budgeted the utilities in Tanglewood and College Park. And then fiscal year '24 saw a huge number on residential streets because the fiscal year we're in now is a year where we're awarding the streets part of those projects. But those projects are no longer going to be on the books moving forward, and so that's why that decrease. Now, on the CIP front, this was looking great last year, right? Because it was saying, "Oh, look at us, we're increasing our CIP, and it's going to continue to indefinitely continue to climb up." Well, of course, that wasn't our reality, right? We knew that our CIP was going to also level out because of course, the public safety building. We're not building $52 million buildings, every year, right? And so that's highlighted in blue. But nonetheless, this gives you a sense of just our continual investment on residential streets, thoroughfares, utilities, et cetera. One of the things that I want to point out, because I think it's important, is that out of the $40 million, we're only issuing, I think, $6 million in debt out of that. And so I think that is a great story to tell because we always do a really good job. And this city in general has always and continues to do a really good job of not relying solely on issuing debt to do capital large projects. We've always had a really good strategy to combine cash with debt, and this next CIP year in fiscal year '25 is no different. I'm going to fly through this one simply because it makes this again, the same points as CIPs. I mentioned how we're able to transfer excess dollars to the new fiscal year for different things. This is one example of what that looks like. So fiscal year '25, we're projecting transferring $4.5 million from the general fund to the CIP. This is a benefit. And so part of our strategy to not depend on issuing debt for projects is the fact that we've always done a good job of being able to carry over excess or transfer money from the general fund over to the CIP fund to help with that effort and to utilize cash. And so that doesn't change for fiscal year '25. We're anticipating continuing to do that. Now, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, what happened in fiscal year '22? I don't remember. Fiscal year '22 was a large transfer year because that was the year at the conclusion, that was the year that we had received, fiscal year '21 was the year that we had received our ARPA funds. And during the pandemic, we also experienced a higher level of excess availability of funds because people weren't traveling, people weren't, there was some of our expenditures just on an operational front just weren't utilized up as much. And so it presented a very unique opportunity to do a significant transfer from the general fund to the CIP in fiscal year '22. Thanks to that out of the ordinary excess cash, but also thanks to some of the cash that we received through ARPA that we utilize as loss of revenue.
One thing I want to add is that, keep in mind also, we also postponed some CIP project in the COVID time, because you notice in '21, it drops. So those funds will carry over to '22.
So I want to talk a little bit about the pay program. I do plan on, at Tuesday's council meeting, very specifically talking more detail about the proposed pay program and an alternative option that we've developed for the pay program, because I think that topic warrants its own dedicated time. I think it's important when we talk about the specifics about the pay program on Tuesday to also go into the details of describing the problem and what is the problem that I'm trying to solve with the proposed pay program, talking about the implications of the pay program in great detail. That'll take some time, and I don't want to take that time today, since obviously today's focus is the bigger picture, plus you getting to hear from the directors and the chiefs. But obviously, for purposes of the preliminary budget, we do have some dollars in the preliminary budget that I'm going to highlight at a very high level, and again, go into the details of that on Tuesday. This slide is simply just to convey our investment into our employees over the last 4 years. For me, it's always important to showcase what we've been able to do in recent years, because this isn't a one-time thing, right? We have been trying to, address our retention and our vacancy issues from day one, but nobody could have anticipated going through a pandemic and the impact that was going to have on just everything. But nonetheless, this highlights that between fiscal years 21 and 24, we in essence increased our recurring expenditures by over $5 million. And that was through a combination of the implementation of the 2020 compensation study, but also significantly increasing our portion of the premium expense that goes into our health fund. We did that in fiscal year 21 to the tune of a little over $1 million. That doesn't get talked about enough, and so I will show a slide later that shares that story. But in essence, we have invested in our employees, but we know it hasn't been enough. And so what we're proposing is what I'm referring to, a transformational pay program that would be implemented over 2 fiscal years, 25 and 26. In 25, PD and fire would receive a 5% across the board. Those due a step would receive an additional 1.5%. Now, keep in mind that all of these recommendations are based off of a compensation study that was just completed. And the compensation study validates and confirms that our police and fire folks are the furthest behind market, because the pandemic did cause the market to significantly increase the pay for police and fire in other markets. And so if this comes across as more funds going towards police and fire, that is the case, but that is the case because the data supports that to be the case. And the data does support that police and fire are furthest behind market. So just keep that in mind. This isn't a recommendation based off of favoritism. This isn't a recommendation, based off of anything else other than just the data. And I'll share that data with you on Tuesday to a greater degree. But in essence, what's being proposed here is that for public safety personnel, our civilian employees would receive a 3% across the board. We're proposing increasing minimum wage from $13 to $15 an hour. And I'm going to hit on how we plan on paying for that here in a second. Sorry, excuse me. But in fiscal year 26, the intention is to then move everybody to 90% of market. And I'll show you what those costs are here in the next slide.
Mr. Garza?
Yes.
You mentioned that there was a 2020 survey, and then I know we're really big on analytics. There's a 2020 survey, and then I would assume a 2023 or 2024 survey regarding salaries for safety personnel. Is that something that we could see in advance of Tuesday's meeting so that we have the opportunity to look at what those numbers look like and what the survey results were?
Sure, so it's 2020 and 2024.
Okay.
The 2020 study would be easy to send because that one was completely completed and it's in its final format. 2024 is not in its final format, but I can still send some of the raw data. It might not be as highly summarized in an executive summary type of fashion to the extent that you would see the 2020 data, because that part of it hasn't been completed for 2024. But the short answer is yes. My other comment is that this study was for every single position within the organization. This study did not just apply for police and fire. My intent with Tuesday's conversation is to make that conversation about everybody. I think it's important that council get a good picture of where we stand with pay with every single position in our organization, because I contend and will always contend that every position in our organization is equally important. And so that's why I also need more time to walk through that and plan to do that on Tuesday. But yeah, short answer is yes. I can certainly do that probably over the weekend. Having completed the presentation that I plan on going through on Tuesday, so I wouldn't have that to share. But certainly some of the raw data, yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the right-hand side of this slide, we'll see what appears to be a low cost to this pay program of just a little over $400,000. But it's important to understand how we got to that. So I mentioned the breakdown of the proposed pay program for 2025. The total value of that is actually $1.8 million. So our pay program for fiscal year 25 is 1.8 million. The one thing that I forgot to mention in this history slide was that if we remove the $1 million that we allocated towards the premiums, it was roughly $1 million on average over the course, or just a little less than $1 million over the course of each of those years on average that we applied towards the pay program. And what we're proposing to do in fiscal year 25 is a $1.8 million pay program. So when I use the term transformational pay program, it's because for us, doing a $1.8 million pay program in 1 year is unheard of. We were blessed to do on average that roughly $1 million pay program over the last 4 years because of, increased sales tax revenue, increased property tax revenue, things we're sort of trending good in both of those departments, and you've heard me describe that in other settings. And so that's why this is a big deal for us, to do a $1.8 million. But that's also why it necessitates having conversations about, well, how are you going to pay for that? Because it is not something that we typically can afford to do. And then also we need to keep in mind that we don't foresee significant increases in sales tax revenue. We don't foresee significant increases in new property tax revenue. Next year going into fiscal year 26, for example, we're not going to have that much wiggle room on the sales tax side to play with, right? We're not going to have the blessing of all of the savings on the debt rate to be able to kind of help with that cause, right? And so we need to anticipate what our situation is going to look like in fiscal year 26 forward, which is why we are proposing the decrease in the updated service credit for TMRS to help fund some of this pay program. We're actually recommending 2 changes to TMRS, one of which has an impact, one of which doesn't. The one that has an impact, of course, is the decrease in updated service credit in terms of impact on some employees. And then the second one is simply just adopting a non-retroactive COLA. That was something that became an option just the last legislative session where the TMRS Act was amended, and that produces some saving for us. But in essence, the TMRS gross savings in fiscal year 25 by making those changes is $936,000. Also proposing freezing 10 positions in fiscal year 25. That accounts for $464,000. And so that brings down the net cost of this $1.8 million pay program to a little over $400,000, which makes it more manageable, right, from a dollar figure standpoint, because of those budget reductions in freezing 10 positions, but also the savings produced by the changes to TMRS. And again, I'll talk about more of those details on Tuesday. In spite of that, our personnel cost variance is actually going to be closer to $1 million. And that's because of the following. And so this chart describes the budget impact per fund, and I'll draw your attention mostly to the general fund. So the general fund accounts for that roughly $402,000 pay program that I just referenced, but we will, for the first time, have to document an increase to the overtime line item for the fire department. This year alone, the fire department's on pace to hit about $1.4 million in overtime expense. 5 years ago, that was less than $500,000. Just to give you a sense of how significant this impact is on the budget. And think of what we would have had been able to do, or what would have not have had to happen if that $431,000 didn't have to be put in the budget to account for the continual increase in overtime for the fire department. Now, we can certainly, have conversations offline about some of the operational changes that led to the significant increase in overtime for the fire department. That's certainly something that Chief Gomez is certainly aware of, and understanding that is something that we need to try and find a better balance for. But nonetheless, the situation is forcing us to put the additional dollars in next year's budget to account for those increases. We're also putting some additional dollars for temp pay. That's the yellow figure. We're also proposing increasing our part-time pay from $10 an hour to $12 an hour as part of the pay program. And most of the funds that hire part-time employees are other funds. Think of the golf course, community center. I mean, those are really the two largest operations that hire part-time employees, and so that's why that's under the other funds category as opposed to the general fund. So yeah, any questions? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
When you talked about freezing positions, are those general population positions or those
That's a great question. So
fire?
it's a combination of both, which is actually why you see the utility fund going towards the left here. So the 10 positions are all with Public Works. I wanted to, quite frankly, to try and freeze some positions with police and fire as well, because police and fire and Public Works are three departments with our largest vacancies. However, it was impossible to do that because the savings that are produced from the vacancies in police and fire are what helps pay for the overages of overtime. And as you can tell, the savings that would get produced by vacancies in the fire department, as an example, aren't nearly enough to cover the overtime overages for the fire department. And for the police department, we don't have the same overtime issue, but nonetheless, with the police department, we do have to rely on the money that's there for the personnel to cover the overtime for the police. So mathematically, it just wasn't going to work out to freeze positions with those departments. So Public Works is feeling the pinch there. Public Works has some divisions that are utility centric. And so about half of those are utilities and half of those are general fund. And so that's why this utility impact shows in the red.
And certainly, this is something you may want to look at in greater detail, or we may want to look at in greater detail on Tuesday, but vacancies across the board, general population
Yes,
versus
that's on-
fire
yeah.
and police, what do those vacancies look like?
That's on Tuesday, but yeah, I mean, right now, as far as I know, I think we're still at 20 for PD. We were at 10 for fire, but we just hired some folks, so I think that's been decreased. I don't know what I'm looking at, but
One thing,
we had 30 with Public Works. So it was 30 with Public Works, 20 with police, and 10 with fire. But again, both police and fire have hired some folks just in the last 2-3 weeks, so that number might be less now.
just want to add, we won't go into details, but there was some analysis, deep understanding of that data of the vacancy. It was not randomly picked.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'll make sure
I mean,
everybody knows that.
we've had some positions with Public Works that have been vacant for over a year, for example. And so we did not just randomly pick out positions. We specified positions that just had been vacant for a very long time. We're also very intentionally freezing the position versus cutting it, because I also think it's premature to make the decision to cut the position. So for example, Public Works, if I'm defunding 10 positions, it makes sense to wait until we hopefully can hire some of the others before making an intelligent, smart decision on whether the ones that were frozen were needed or not. So for now, this strategy is simply intended to try and help fill the vacancies, because as I've mentioned to employees, I'd rather have less employees, less employees, making as much money as we can afford, than otherwise.
And is there any kind of risk survey that was completed regarding changes to retirement so that we knew if there was any potential fallout from that?
So I'll talk about that on Tuesday, but
Okay.
the impact is individualized,
Okay.
and I'll hit on that on Tuesday for sure. That's sort of another one of those things where it just depends. Okay, so on the pay program side, I did want to highlight what the estimated cost would be for fiscal year 26, because some decisions that we're recommending being made in fiscal year 25 are intentionally more so driven by the fact that we have this financial commitment in fiscal year 26. It's obviously unheard of for us to, in essence, commit to a pay program 2 years out. But because that's in essence what I'm proposing to do, it forces us to be mindful of that. And that'll make more sense when I kind of go through the budget specifically with the general fund. But overall, the pay program is $3.2 million over a 2-year period. And again, historically, we've only been able to afford on our best years just shy of $1 million on average pay program every year. So doing a $3.2 million pay program over 2 years is, in my opinion, transformational, for us. But at the same time, we're trying to solve a problem that looks significantly different today than it did 5 years ago. And that's the picture that I hope to paint on Tuesday. I'm going to fly through some of these for sake of time. These slides simply just highlight what the movement within our debt service fund. One of the things I forgot to mention earlier, and this is a good slide to mention it, is that as part of the public safety building, we are accounting for $1 million from the Sales Tax Development Corporation for a 10-year period. So the chart on the right is what more so highlights the debt service once we take into account that $1 million reduction from BSTDC. And so you can see that we continue to trend in the right direction in that regard. Hence, the conversations that we need to have in the, moving forward about the CIP in the outer years and all that kind of stuff. But for now, it's trending good. Again, for sake of time, I'm going to fly through some of these. General fund, I will spend a little bit of time on this one because it's one of the ones that garners the most attention. But how this is looking at for fiscal year 25 is a $61 million program, which is an increase of $1.4 million in expenditures. You can see in the bottom, as is typical with all the other slides, right? What is blue is headed in the right direction here for for the general fund, and then what's in red is what's being eliminated or removed or reduced, comparatively speaking, to fiscal year 24. One of the things there that I do want to point out is that we are not recommending a transfer to the stabilization fund in fiscal year 25. We typically don't even make that determination until later in the year anyway, but I don't foresee that even being an option going into next fiscal year anyway. But that's why that item there is trending towards the left, because we did do a transfer out of the general fund to the stabilization fund in fiscal year 24. You'll also see all the increases in blue, with the majority of the increase, 88% of it, going to public safety services, $1.2 million. And that just speaks to the pay program and the level of the pay program that's going towards public safety in fiscal year 25. But they also have some one-time expenditures there that are associated with them. But you'll hear about that more a little bit later. I'm going to fly through some of these because some of it is repetitive. As an example, some of this talks about PD and fire radios, computers, that type of stuff. When you hear from each department, they'll highlight the one-time expenditures that are in their budget. And so I don't want to steal their thunder. So I'm going to fly through some of this, but obviously With the budget increase of $1.4 million in the general fund, you'll get to hear from each department what that increase is for each of their respective departments. One of the things that I do want to point out, again, to reiterate the point, is that we are seeing a revenue budget increase of $2 million, or proposing a revenue increase of $2 million. And this is how that's broken out. I've already talked about the property taxes and how we're in essence proposing and projecting a little over $600,000 in new property tax revenue into the general fund, the $700,000 swing, right, in the revenue risk on the sales tax side. We also have been doing really good on the interest income side, and so we've increased that for next year. Our ambulance billing actually did really well this year, and so we are increasing that some next year. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, help me understand the math, you just said that our general fund increase is 1.4, but our new revenue is 2.01 million. That's intentional. Like I said, we need to be mindful of the fact that we have this commitment in fiscal year 26 for a pay program. And so we need to be mindful of setting the foundation for having the cash to be able to follow through with that commitment in fiscal year 26. And we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what appraisals are going to look like going into fiscal year 26. We don't know what the economy is going to do to sales tax revenue. And so it behooves us that if we want to follow through with our commitment of a pay program of $3.2 million over 2 years, that we utilize revenues and anticipate utilizing revenues coming in fiscal year 25 and saving them for 26. How does this look overall for the general fund? We do have a policy that requires that we maintain a 25% minimum reserve, and we always never budget right at that line. And so the current preliminary budget for the general fund has us anticipating an ending fund balance of $19.18 million at the end of fiscal year 25. And that is roughly $3.5 million greater than what our minimum reserve is. And we always have a cushion there. That's just the way that we've budgeted and that the way that our practice is. Think of that cushion there as a, emergency type of situation. Think, if we get a hurricane and we have to increase our expenditures, all of a sudden, there's a little bit of wiggle room there for us to be able to do that without touching our self-imposed minimum reserve of 25%. All right. So utility fund, I'm definitely going to fly through this one, but it's the same approach, showing the blue versus the red, what's going up, what's going down. You're going to get to hear from Greg today on some of the utility operation, and so I won't steal his thunder. I'll just leave it at the utility fund department budget decreased by $1 million, and he'll get more into the details when he comes up and presents his budget. On the utility side, same story. Not as much of a cushion, but there's a reason for that, because think of all the operations that are in our general fund and the budget impact that it would cost those operations if we were to hit some kind of natural disaster situation. But nonetheless, same idea. We don't budget or anticipate anywhere near the line. Our minimum reserve requirement would be $8.18 million, and we're anticipating an ending working capital of $9.5 million at the end of fiscal year 25 for the utility fund. On the environmental services, I won't steal Christie's thunder. Christie will be presenting the budget for environmental services today on Daryl's behalf. But again, same story. The blue is what's increasing for next year, and the red is what's coming off. And again, same story on the ending fund balance for this environmental services fund, in that our minimum reserve requirement would be $10.5 million, and we're anticipating $11.7 million. So again, we leave some wiggle room. The health plan has a huge success story to it, so I'm just gonna go right to it. But it's kind of crazy thinking back on sort of the situation we were in 2019. In 2019, we had $1.5 million in fund balance with our health fund. And in the last 5 years, we've been able to build that back up to a level that it hadn't been in 10 years plus. And this can't go understated that the big reason behind this turnaround is because we've invested more money into the health fund on the premium side. This has allowed us the ability to not increase premiums for employees. As a matter of fact, it's allowed us the opportunity to do the opposite. And so I'm not going to go through the details of this, but over the last 5 years, we've been able to decrease employee premiums. We've been able to add value to our health benefits through some of the supplemental offerings. This lists all of those out. I won't go through them. But there's a positive correlation between what we've been able to do for the health fund and the fact that it's rebounded financially. Because it goes without saying that the more money you have in your fund balance, the more risk you can take as it relates to making changes, having conversations about changes, et cetera. And to that end, we are in the midst of having very serious conversations, the most serious they've ever been in the 5 years that I've been here, on adding a third plan for 2025, which would be an exclusive provider organization or EPO plan that would have lower deductibles, lower out-of-pocket maximums. That is the one thing that employees continue to provide feedback on. They appreciate the decreased, premiums that we've been able to provide and those changes. But at the end of the day, those high deductible plans, they're called high deductible plans because they have high deductibles, right? At the end of the day, there's still a significant amount of cash that is needed by an employee when something happens. And so we are exploring very seriously rolling out a third plan, an EPO plan for 2025. We are in the middle of working with our benefits consultant. We've been having meetings with them almost bi-weekly for like the last couple of months, trying to understand what are the financial risks associated with being able to implement that type of plan at this stage of the game. As of now, it's looking favorable to implement it, but I will say, to be clear, that this plan would cost more money. I mean, it goes without saying that if employees are paying less deductible, less out of pocket, someone's got to cover the difference, right? I mean, the cost of care isn't going down because we have an EPO plan, right? So that just means that we would be more financially responsible to cover the cost of that. But again, those are risks that we are more likely willing to take at a time when you have a very healthy fund balance. Definitely not a conversation to have, in 2019 when your fund balance is $1.5 million, right? So it is a more expensive plan for the city, to be clear, but it's also would be a more expensive plan up front for the employee, right? Because at the end of the day, the premiums would be higher for the employee, and it makes sense, right? It makes sense that there be a correlation between the cost of the plan and the benefit. And we're in the process of also having those conversations with our consultant to figure out what that premium structure would be. Because again, it makes sense, right? If you want to have a lower deductible, a lower out of pocket, you got to pay more money up front, right? Now, again, the details of that are still being figured out, but as of now, it's looking favorable that we will be recommending that. And I hope to finalize that throughout the course of July so that come the official proposed budget in August, whatever budget impact that inclusion of that third plan has is incorporated into the budget. The only comment I'll make on hotel tax fund is that we're plateauing in this area as well. And we're actually going to recommend a decrease, small decrease to the proposed revenues in this fund for 2025 of $50,000 less. The other thing that I'll point out is the chart or the pie chart on the left that highlights how we split all that money up. Because I know oftentimes folks sometimes assume that all of the $1.8 million that we receive goes to our now Discover Victoria, but that's not the case. It goes towards helping fund our Main Street program. Some of it goes towards funding our community center building. Some of it, of course, goes to CVB or Discover Victoria. Some of it goes to sports tourism. This is where our allocation towards the Texas Zoo comes from as well. Youth sports complex, some expenditures associated with the youth sports complex come out of the hotel tax fund. And then, of course, our outside agency program, which currently is accepting applications. You might have seen that press release go out last week, or might have seen some media coverage on it. We're not expecting changing that program or the funding level of it, and so that's why we didn't feel the need, if you will, to come do a robust presentation with council like we did last year. Last year, there was a lot of conversation with you about that program because we were running into issues of just too many applicants, not enough money, right? But we've revamped the program, and by all accounts, it was a successful revamp, and so that continues to be rolled out. And in a nutshell, that's sort of the bigger picture of where we sit. Where I started is where I'll end for this part of it, which of course is that our fiscal year 25 budget needs to be mindful of our economy, even if at its surface it may not look that way because of the blessings of conservative budgeting and the blessings of paying off debt early. But the reality is that the economy is shifting around us, and we need to be mindful of that and anticipate that moving forward. Of course, all of that conversation only is bringing greater attention to economic development. I do think, and I've already had conversations with Danielle and some with VSTDC, we're going to have to start to think about being more aggressive with some of our economic development programs and initiatives, because if we are going to have plateauing revenues, we need to step up our game in trying to limit that plateau of revenues. Meaning we need to step up our game to try and ensure that we have as much retail as possible, right? Because if we're gonna have plateau revenues on sales tax, what can we do to try and limit that decrease? Or maybe we're successful in actually having it continue to increase, right? But anyway, more attention to economic development is gonna have to be part of the conversation. The pay program, this is always a conversation, and it should. On Tuesday, like I said, I'll break down the details of the compensation study comparisons, defining the problem with the vacancy numbers, very much aligned with the information that April is asking for and has suggested is important. We'll go through that. But that is a conversation that ought to take place routinely. And so we want to be mindful of that. The health plan, financial stability, employee benefits, et cetera. As I said, the health plan is in a good spot. And we feel comfortable taking some level of risk with that at this stage of the game. But again, that doesn't mean be irresponsible, right? That just means that we've been able to build up that fund and had great success, that it's now time to maybe have more conversation about how we can all benefit from that a little bit greater than maybe what we've had the last few years. Compensation plan, that of course aligns with everything. We're gonna have to have conversations in the next few years about whether we want to continue simply implementing the 2035 comp plan and all its related master plans that we've completed up until this point, or if we want to embark on something completely new, something different. And of course, the CIP. You know better than I that the streets and other infrastructure are critical to our growth and critical to the needs of our community. And so continuing to have that conversation obviously goes without saying. And that's it for now, for me, for this topic. I'll come back later at the end of the day to highlight next steps and timeline and whatnot. But for now, I'll entertain any questions on sort of the big picture that I attempted to paint before we turn it over into going into the details of various departments.
No questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Garza. Let's dive into our department presentations then.
Okay. All right, sorry, man. He's like, don't touch the mouth. Okay, so I thought it would be prudent to go through a story myself as a way to highlight how it's structured, how it flows, sort of just as an example, especially for our new council members and just in general new folks that might be tuning into the workshop that hadn't tuned into a workshop before. But in a nutshell, not every single department will present a story to you, but every department does have a story. And our preliminary budget, by the way, is on our website already. So if you go to victoriatx.gov and you click on the budget icon, it'll take you to the preliminary budget. You know, it's important for us to be transparent. I'll caveat that obviously with the fact that it's not the proposed budget. The proposed budget is legally the official document that you would need to consider for adoption. For now, it's simply just a preliminary look at how things are shaping out. But again, our intent is to be as transparent as possible with it, because transparency, I think, leads to just greater understanding, and everybody wins if everybody has a greater understanding of where we are and why and what we want to do. But anyway, so you'll hear from the majority of the department heads. Please feel free to ask them the hardest questions you can think of. They all, from what I heard, they all stayed up all night going through their respective departmental budgets to make sure that they understand every single bit of it. But what you'll get to hear from each of them is a little bit about their department. And as I alluded to earlier, I think it's important to have this intersect of finances and department and what we do, how we're structured, because it's all tied together, right? And so for purposes of this flow, I'm not going to go through the details of the story, but know that you'll hear about the department description. You're going to have a chance to look at the organizational chart for each department. You're going to notice some blue boxes and gray boxes as departments go through their presentations. All that means is that the blue positions are the ones relevant to this particular story that they're running through, and that there's a separate story that accounts for the gray. So for example, HR has a story for risk management. And so the money associated with paying for the risk manager and that HR generalist that's paid out of that fund or that division is not accounted for in this story. And so Public Works will be the classic example, because they've got a huge organizational chart and so they've got I think I even asked them to remove the gray actually, because it was just going to look too big. But Public Works, obviously has utility employees, general fund employees, and so just be mindful of that. That's what that means, is that this particular story I'm running through only applies to the positions in blue. Every department try to one-up each other with a department picture. So you'll see some pictures of the departments, or oftentimes some action shots. You'll get to hear about the mission of the department. As I alluded to earlier in the year when we had conversations about the library mission statement, it's typically through this exercise that we have conversations about the mission statement internally, because going into these presentations, the department heads have conversations with myself or the assistant city managers about the mission for their stories. That's typically the time that we talk about department missions. You'll hear about goals and objectives for each department. They'll include some highlights from the current fiscal year that we're in now, because I think it's important for you and for the public to be exposed to some of the success stories of our organization. Some of the departments you receive annual reports from, typically in the spring timeframe, winter, spring timeframe, but not every department provides an annual report. And so this is an opportunity for every department, but especially the departments that don't provide an annual report, to highlight some of the successes that they've achieved throughout the current fiscal year. And I also think this is important because it showcases that we're doing a great job. And I truly do believe that our organization is doing a great job. So as an example, we had leadership academies, 2 leadership academies in fiscal year 24, where we, each hosting 25, so 50 of our leaders participated through these leadership academies. Just to give you an example, those are types of things that I think are important for you to know. Each department has also produced performance metrics. This has been an ongoing process. I've been talking about, and I know Mark's been talking about performance metrics, from day one. It's been a journey to get to where we are now with performance metrics. And so I would venture to say that specifically for the budget stories this cycle going into fiscal year 25, the level of sophistication and time and energy that was put into the performance metrics by far overshadows what we have been able to do in the past. And that's really more of a credit to Marisa with finance. who took it upon herself to really help each department achieve that. But in any case, these are some examples of the ones related to HR. And so April, to your point, about vacancies, for example. So, this is not just for police and fire, but just overall, this gives a sense of, on average, how many active employees we have, what the average vacancy number looks like. And so you can see, for example, that for fiscal year 24, which is the year that we're in now, we're on average active at 584. So just some good data for you to look at. And I've asked each department head to, as they go through their story, highlight maybe only one or two performance metric, just to use as an example. This is a turnover rate by year for the entire organization, for example. So just some really good data that we're trying to showcase and highlight and make transparent and visible to you and to the public. We've also asked each department to highlight some efficiencies. I think it's important to, when applicable, to highlight to you and to the public when we've been able to find smarter, better ways to do things that have either saved money, have maybe improved the process by making it quicker, has modernized it, or sometimes just makes it just better, right? And so, for example, HR highlights the implementation of NeoGov. This was a labor of love, if I can call it that, because of the challenges associated with its implementation. But nonetheless, last year we began the implementation of NeoGov, which consolidated 5 different programs that HR was using into one. And so think of the efficiency in time, the improvement in customer service to our employees themselves, when now you don't have to go to 3, 4, 5 different softwares to pull up information because now it's all in one software, right? And so that's an example of using technology as an efficiency that, again, helps provide better. Oh, and by the way, it actually didn't even end up costing us that much more money, or actually was a savings, because what it was costing us to maintain the 5 softwares, it was more economical to have the one. So not only are you saving money, but you're providing a better service and saving a lot of employee time. And so each department will highlight some of these successes if applicable. I think it's important for you and the public to know that we're constantly working on ways to run the organization more efficiently and better. More importantly, you'll get to hear about some of the proposed programs or initiatives that departments want to embark on in fiscal year 25. Sometimes these new initiatives have the attachment of dollar signs, but sometimes they don't. And so going through this storytelling process allows department heads to elaborate on things that they want to focus on within existing dollars that they have in their budget, or maybe something that doesn't necessarily necessitate money, but simply necessitates time. But time is money, right? And so it's important for us to get a feel for what are our folks spending time on, even if it doesn't necessarily come with an increase in budget in a particular area. But again, I think it's important for folks to be exposed to that. So as an example, one of the creative things that HR wants to explore going into next fiscal year is a referral incentive program. This is something that has become common in many organizations, especially with the vacancy figures, right? Cities have thought, well, let's create an incentive program. If you can bring in somebody, a friend, a family member, whomever, and that person is with us for X amount of time, we'll incentivize you to help us, in essence, fill the vacancies, right? That's become a thing. So we want to explore that. We want to continue the implementation of NeoGov and resolving some of those issues. One of the things that, it doesn't necessarily cost money, but takes up time, is even just the standardization of the job descriptions for all departments and all positions, right? We're obviously one organization, and we should have consistent job descriptions for every department, and that just takes time to achieve that. And so HR wants to spend the time to continue to do that. And training. One of the things that we've observed, in light of the turnover that we've experienced, is that obviously as you lose people in the organization, you lose institutional knowledge, right? And so it's created to a greater degree today than maybe it existed in the past, this need for more and more training because we have more and more new people coming into the organization that need to be exposed to how we do things. Not to mention the introduction of new technology like NeoGov and others that you'll hear about and have heard about. We got to train people into using the new technology and the new softwares, right? I know that in some conversations that I've had with Sandra, our interim HR director, up until this point, she's already observed that, we need to do more training, right? I mean, it's great that we have this software, right? But are we fully capitalizing out of all of its features? The answer is probably no at this time, but that comes with training, right? And with time. So we want to focus on that. Every department is going to provide a statement highlighting the budget impact for fiscal year 25. And so HR, I'm just going to read it. The human resources budget request equals $641,000, an increase of $18,000 or roughly 3% compared to fiscal year 24. It includes $0 in one-time expenses, and so all of that amount is recurring. Of that $641,000, 75% is for personnel. This part is new. In the past, we did not have this sentence that specifically highlight what percent of the budget was associated with personnel. I felt it was important going into this next year to do that, to really highlight the amount of money, percentage-wise, that it's going towards our people. Now, keep in mind that personnel for us is more than wages. That's your allocation towards your health plan premium. That's the allocation towards our commitment to retirement, to taxes, to Social Security. I mean, just everything, right? And so it's easy sometimes to just focus a conversation on a wage without accounting for that extra 30 to 40%, that has to come with it. But anyway, so you'll get to hear from every department, walk through that. Some departments that have one-time expenditures, they'll just tell them to you. And then some might highlight where they're located on this table, but there may not be a lot of time for that level of detail. But know that you can go in there and you can yourself access level of detail, whether it's through clicking some of those arrows. Further at the bottom, there's also a very detailed list of each story, highlighting all of that. So if I were to just go to that, for example, at the very, very bottom, there's a lot of detail around level of specificity of budget. As you scroll through the bottom, we're also showing the expenses in different formats. So table, bar chart, et cetera, just to help folks follow it. We also, for the first time, have included a fiscal year 25 and beyond section so that departments can, if they have time, can hit on things that we need to be mindful of over the next few years. The big one for a lot of the departments that are currently at 700 Main is a potential move to the complex that we're in now. Because as you know, our plan, once municipal court and police move to the new facility, is to look at renovating the City Hall complex, the building that we're in now, and City Hall, which would then relocate some departments from 700 Main to this building. And so that will be a consistent theme for a few departments under this section, but also where you get to hear about just other initiatives. And so in this instance, the topic of CERT pay, always comes up. And so that's something that needs to be continued to be explored. One thing that's not on there, but I think makes sense to continue to explore in the future is a program for tuition reimbursement. The county just implemented one last year. And we used to have one. And so I think it's important that we just evaluate moving forward the benefits of that to explore the feasibility of incorporating it back into the fold when we can afford to, obviously. And that's it. You'll get the breakdown of number of positions and a description for each position. Department heads are not going to go through this level of detail. They're not going to go through explaining each position. They're going to focus more so on the top half of each story. But feel free to ask them questions about the budget, but also feel free to go through these stories on your own time. And of course, reach out with any questions. So that's the flow. And I'm already behind schedule. So any questions on flow and how that's going to work? All right. So I'm actually going to go through fully a story with you. just in case you're not tired of hearing me talk yet. Are you going to pull it up, or do you want me to pull it up? Okay. So Ashley couldn't be with us this morning. And so Lauren, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to, What? Yeah, she was asked yesterday at 4. I wasn't gonna put her in that spot. So I'm gonna run through the communication and public affairs story on Ashley's behalf. So I'm gonna try and sound PIO-y now. So I just made up a word. So the department description, the Communication and Public Affairs Department is responsible for the planning and implementation of the City of Victoria's communication efforts, working collaboratively across all departments for both internal and external communication needs. We accomplish these efforts through our various communication methods, including TV 15, our public access government cable channel, social media, website, alert center, media relations, creative print and digital content, newsletters, our city app, Citizens Academy, and other community engagement events. It goes without saying that our communications department now and everything that they do is significantly different, better, much broader focus, much more effective than it has ever been before. And a lot of that is credited to Ashley and her team. And her team, you see them often. It's not a large department. And I'll say that for the size of our department and the output that they produce, I mean, our department is putting out products that other communication departments in other cities twice this size are putting out. And so that speaks to just their level of work and of course the team. They should have photoshopped me in there if I'm giving the presentation. But in any case, the picture on the right was at the Duck Pond grand opening event. Of course, you have George, Alvesa, Ashley, Sam, AJ, Lauren. They all do a tremendous job for our communications department, and so thank you all for that. Of course, the mission is to provide relevant, accessible communication with our residents and our employees through creative and modern means. The team aims to provide timely, accurate information in cohesive ways to meet the needs of a diverse population and foster positive, productive engagement with its citizens. And I think it goes without saying that our communication department does an effective job at doing that. In part, because I know that Ashley is very mindful of the goals and the objectives and very mindful about every day thinking about how they can achieve these goals and objectives in a better way. And ultimately, the key goals for this department are to develop information, relevant information and content, identify those information gaps and educational needs, and of course, try and fill them. Increase civic engagement through our educational programs. That's our low-hanging fruit. Our Citizens Academy and the alumni of our Citizens Academy are our low-hanging fruit for greater civic engagement. And so she's constantly thinking about ways to do that. And so with that said, some of the highlights for fiscal year 24, some of which you've heard because she has provided some of this in the past to you, but on the content creation side, right, which is one of the goals, the department has received some awards recently. Received the first place through the City County Marketing Association. Green Ribbon Project received an award through Tamio. They received an award for Outside the Newsroom for some of the content and programming that they put together. And so not only are they producing great content, but it's award-winning content and award-winning programming. And so I think it's amazing and awesome that other communities and associations are recognizing the work of Ashley and her team and the work of our communications department. And people are noticing. You know, people are reaching out to Ashley saying, hey, I love that you're doing this. How are you doing it? And so it's awesome when people are stealing our ideas because they work. One of the big successes of fiscal year 24 was this department's involvement with a full-scale training exercise. That was really big. We had a training exercise in coordination with the Office of Emergency Management, which was an active shooter simulation exercise. And that was big because this was probably the first time in a full-scale exercise that large that we incorporated a communications component to it to the degree that we did. Meaning we literally walked through where is PIO going to set up? Where are we going to do the press conferences? We literally even went through mock press conferences. I mean, we literally went through the whole shebang on anticipating what is the communications role aspect in a situation like that. And that was huge. And so I think there was a lot of lessons learned that came out of that. And so we'll be better prepared from a communication standpoint if something were to happen. Other recognitions throughout the year are associated with us ourselves recognizing some of our highly engaged residents. As I alluded to earlier, our Citizens Academy is the low-hanging fruit opportunity for folks to understand what's going on in our organization and community. We have the Distinguished Citizens series aspect of this, which are the folks that go through the police program, the fire program, and our Citizens Academy. And so folks that go through those 3 programs become distinguished citizens, and we recognized 8 of them. And I run into them all the time. And so what I think is great about this is that some of the folks that go through these programs, it truly is invigorating their passion for our community and getting them more involved with things. And I think that's great. You'll also hear some successes in professional development. We've highlighted some of those at council meetings throughout the year. But in this particular case, we'll highlight in the story that Lauren went through our internal leadership academy that I alluded to earlier in the HR story that we had 50 folks go through in fiscal year 24. And talking about recognizing our folks' jobs. Sam's stories were featured in the Texas Municipal League's Texas Town and City magazine. Sam's the best writer in the state, and the Texas Municipal League has caught note of that. So don't leave us, Sam. Some of the metrics in the story for communication and public affairs, rightfully so, focus on reach. You'll notice the big difference between 2019 and 2024 as it relates to social media reach. I mean, that just goes to show the success of the reorg that we did in 2019 to have communication be its own department. That goes to the successes and the positions that we've created since then, the people that we've hired, and the energy and time that has been spent by our folks in focusing on this engagement. And it's huge. I mean, it's literally doubled in the last 5 years the number of people that we're reaching on social media. And again, that just goes to show goes to show the efforts of our team and their success. Now, if you're wondering why is 2020 such a large sort of year, the pandemic. The pandemic caused a lot of folks to pay attention to what we were putting out on social media. And so this was one of those metrics that we can also pinpoint the pandemic attributed to more people paying attention to social media in 2020, hence the spike in 2020. But that's a success story there. You'll notice also an increase in newsroom visits. This highlights the great job we've done in, 1, organizing the newsroom on the website, but 2, drawing people to it, whether that's through the newsletter, whether that's through social media or our own release of our own press releases. More people are going to our website, our newsroom site, to access information. And I think that that's great because it's going to be accurate, it's going to be timely, because they're coming directly to the source of it, which of course is us, right? So that's great in that regard as well. One of the things too that has happened within the Communication and Public Affairs Department is now through better tracking mechanism, we've been able to track the different requests coming in for work. Because as I mentioned, Sam's the best writer in the state, so now every department, wants to utilize her for something, or AJ, is an amazing video producer and editor, and people want to use him for everything too. So there's been a huge increase in demand for our personnel and our staff within the Communication and Public Affairs Department. And so we felt it was important to highlight this with this bottom right metric. Because if we had the money, I would have proposed adding a position in this department in fiscal year 25. Because the demand is there. And we wanted to highlight that demand with this metric because we're only as successful as people perceive us to be. And that's the reality. And so we know that we need to continuously be adding more content, better content, be thinking of different ways to reach people, to tell our story, because we know that we can be doing all amazing things, but if nobody knows that we're doing amazing things, it's almost like people think we're doing nothing, right? And so as our departments are doing more great work, we need more folks to help tell our own story, right? And so We were unable to do it going into fiscal year '25, meaning adding that position. But please keep that in mind that that was a desire going into it that we backtracked from, but may be something that if the money's right, we'll for certain do in fiscal year '26. And I think the results speak for themselves and the value that adding to this team has with our reach and the sophistication of the content and information that gets put out. Some of the efficiencies that this department has experienced recently revolve around just some of the equipment efficiency. Prior to this van, I feel bad for George, but we were using George's personal vehicle quite a bit, and there were just a lot of inefficiencies, with utilizing personal vehicles to get out to a place to conduct work. And so even something as simple as having the right equipment, in this case, the van, has produced a significant efficiency in our staff's ability to be able to respond to different situations or even be able to help support when we do different things. I mean, think of when we have the workshop at the community center. Easy for us to take for granted because when we show up, everything is set up. But there's a whole team behind trying to set that up, and having this piece of equipment helps that process be more efficient. We also are always constantly thinking about how we can be more efficient and more productive utilizing the assets that we have. Oftentimes that comes in the form of reevaluating when we experience a vacancy. And so rather than always simply just saying, hey, someone left, let's just post that vacancy for the exact same job, we always try and ask ourselves, is there an opportunity here? Rather than just do that, is there an opportunity to revamp that job description, maybe create a different position in lieu of the one that left to be able to better meet our goals and objectives, right? And this department is a perfect example of that. We've been able to reorganize the digital media position into a multimedia producer to better manage all of those facets. We've been able to reorganize a multimedia specialist to a brand manager or graphic designer. This will save us money because we were spending and are spending money outsourcing graphic design work. And so while we don't necessarily have a specific dollar figure yet on how much money we think this move will save, we know for a fact it'll save money by limiting the outsourcing of graphic design work, by us having our own graphic designer in-house, but also will produce product quicker because now we'll be able to have somebody in-house do the work versus being dependent on a consultant that's got a million other projects. And so these are the things that our folks are constantly thinking about on how we can be better. And this is an example of that. Some of the new things that Communication and Public Affairs looks to do and improve upon in fiscal year '25 are the branding, which goes hand in hand with what I just described. We've realized, and I hate to admit this, but we've realized just in the short effort of having our brand graphic artist, brand manager position, is that we are so inconsistent with the usage of our city logo. So inconsistent. It looks different blues. I mean, it is like if I were to show you what I've been shown, you'd be like, that doesn't make sense. So even something as simple as improving upon our city branding, I don't mean redoing the brand. We have a great brand in the Star V, but we need to be consistent as an organization, right? Every time somebody prints it on a shirt or prints it on something, it should look the same, right? Every time somebody puts it on a presentation, it should be the same logo with the same blue, right? Now, these things might seem mundane, but from an organizational branding standpoint, they're huge. And if one of our objectives is to create an organizational vibe that is united and that we are one, then even more reason to ensure that we protect that brand so that it's consistent with its usage throughout. So that's an effort that we want to embark upon. We want to engage more with Citizens Academy alumni because, as I mentioned, that's the low-hanging fruit. We know that we need to do, we know there's an opportunity to hear from our residents directly more. And the low-hanging fruit on which residents to solicit that input from are our alumni with Citizens Academy, because these citizens are more educated on how we work and function, and they're accessible because they've already shown interest in us, and we want to reciprocate that interest. And so we do, for example, an annual Citizens Academy Alumni Luncheon where I provide an update on things that are going on. That's sort of been the first step in this process, but we know we can engage with them more, and we want to do that. Employee training and improving on employee training is a consistent theme that you're going to hear about because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. As you experience turnover, you need to just be more mindful of more training. As you introduce more technology, more software, et cetera, you need to focus more on training. And so that'll be a consistent theme. On the budget side, the budget equals $715,000, which is an increase of $34,000 compared to fiscal year '24. This department has no one-time expenditures for fiscal year '25. And of that $715,000, 77% of it is for personnel, and 23% of it is for the M&O aspect of it. One of the things that I forgot to mention when I went through the HR sample is that there's also a description right underneath this table that highlights how much of that increase is due to the proposed pay program. And so in this particular case, we have the $12,379 in baseline adjustments and an increase of $12,316 for the pay program. You're going to also hear this a lot. It's James Foote's fault. 100%, because the cost of software goes up every year. Even when we don't introduce new software, the cost of software goes up every year. And so one of the recurring themes that you're going to hear about is an annual increase in software maintenance for almost every department. Huh? Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Like I said, there is no time to go into the details of it, but it's there for you to go through the details. The only other thing that I'll mention for purposes of communication and public affairs is hit a little bit on the 25 and beyond. Because aside from what I've already described and what I already have alluded to as it relates to what's coming, there's a couple of other things. But before I get to those, I talked briefly about the staffing and the embedded program. I didn't word it that way earlier, but what we in essence envision for this department is to have a staff intimately involved and embedded with departments to offer support. So for example, public safety headquarter building, right? We're gonna have police, fire, and municipal court in that building. We envision growing to the point where we have staff, 2 or 3 personnel, strictly just at the public safety headquarter building that are communication staff. Because if we think of the content, the social media management, that just alone comes with police and fire, it's significant. And it rightfully so should necessitate full-time employees, communication staff to solely service those 3 departments. So we envision communications department growing, but focusing on servicing our departments in chunks or in blocks, with there being a team that provides services for police, fire, and municipal court in that building. We envision something similar for public works centric type of positions, right? And so we think of, environmental services, public works, utilities division, pre-treatment, some of the utility billing, right? We envision there also being a communications professional that services just those departments, right? So as this department grows, and I hope it does, because I think it's important, that's how it would manifest itself. We know that we need to continue investing in equipment and technology. Some of that will come with renovations. I mentioned the build out and improvement to this complex that we're in now once people move to the new building. Part of that is a studio. We currently have a makeshift studio, but we envision once we renovate the building that we're in now and renovate even council chambers, that there will be a studio component to this to help facilitate just everything that we do from the media standpoint. And so that's coming in the future.
Might explain what PEG is to people.
Sure, that's a great question. So, Piggy? Piggy? So the PEG fund, I think it's technically stands for like Public Education Government. And we receive revenue into a PEG fund that comes from our cable providers, it's a pass-through fee that I'm sure they pass through the consumer, but the money comes from are the cable companies. And so that's why we're able to, provide the public access channel on the cable, on local cable companies. They pay us also, in essence, it's part of the franchise agreement structure as well, typically. So for folks that want to provide the service in our community, they need to pay us the franchise, but also pay into the PEG fund. And the PEG fund has some legal limitations on what the money can be used for, because it can only be utilized for those elements, for the public educational aspect of it. And so we typically only utilize those funds for that purpose. But because we don't have sort of any other large recurring expense to that fund builds up. And so right now it's got how much in it? 900?
No, it's got 1 million something.
I was going to say $1 million.
It's got 1 million, I could tell you.
Okay, well, let's just call it $1 million. So roughly $1 million in it that can only be utilized for a specific use. And so we anticipate that once we get to the remodeling the building that we're in now, and let's say the remodel costs $5 million, that we'll be able to utilize money from the PEG fund to help build out the studio aspect of it and improvements to this chamber, since we do utilize a lot of technology in this chamber that then feeds the live stream on TV and contributes to what we put out on our public access channel. I hope that makes sense.
So that $1 million includes the 25 expenditures too?
Uh-oh.
What?
You say we had $1 million. I'm saying we have, after everything's done.
I'm just looking at
Okay,
what your
I'm just
online
saying.
budget
That
is.
makes sure, full disclosure.
1,113 something.
After,
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
with interest?
yeah. with interest.
Well, I'm not seeing interest.
All right. Okay. So I hope that flow made sense. Obviously happy to answer any questions on the budget for communication public affairs as is being proposed for fiscal year 25 or anything else associated with it. Again, this departmental budget is only being proposed to increase by $34,000, most of which is going to personnel, which ultimately makes up 77% of this entire budget.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, so now you'll for real stop hearing from me, because I talk forever. I'm sure everybody else after me will go through these way quicker than I did. And so to start that effort, I'm gonna ask Roger to come up and present his budget.
Actually, we're behind schedule on this. I think everybody could use a break at this point, because we're about 20 minutes past our scheduled break. So why don't we just take a short 5-minute break
Sure.
instead of the
That's cool.
scheduled 15, and then we'll roll back in. All right, let's get back into our presentations.
Okay, so we're making an adjustment to the flow of the presentations, and so for now, we're gonna not do some of the internal service funds and focus on some of the more operational outward departments. And so Jessica's gonna go next to talk about the library.
Very good.
I was told.
Mr. Weller, I was looking forward to your presentation, but, you know,
forward to it too, but it's okay.
but I'm sure Ms. Burgers will be even better, so all the good. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I was told there was a prize for the first person after Jesus, so I'm waiting for that prize to come.
Congratulations. Yeah.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and let's talk about the library. My scrolly is not working. Okay. The department description, you know, we are a place that offers a wide variety of materials, technologies, and opportunity for social connection. I won't read it in detail, but you know, we're a cool place to hang out. Our organizational chart, we have 25 full-time employees. 6 of them are master librarians, and the majority of our team is library assistants in various levels. And we do have 6 part-time employees as well. We have our administration and a lot of our outward training and technology, but a lot of our outward programming, our departments are access services and programming. Access services are the people that welcome you when you walk in to check out materials. And all of our programming team are the people that you see at the 300+ programs that we offer a year. As I've mentioned previously, a lot of our goals and missions are based around our strategic plan that go into our master plan, our newly adopted master plan since 2022. So we have a lot of things, a lot of goals that we'd hope to achieve within the next 20 years. But some of our focuses for the next 5 years are improving access to technology, fostering community awareness support, inspire personal development, and serve as a community anchor. Some of the highlights from this past year, we completed the installation of the Anytime Pickup Locker. As most of you all know, that we received a $43,000 grant from Texas State Library and Archives Commission for this project. In September, we launched our very first library card sign-up month, where we had 35+ local businesses to participate in this event, where you just showed your library card and they gave you a discount. Since this time, we got several people have contacted us saying we want to be part of next September's event. So hopefully those numbers will grow and you'll see more library card holders and more community participation with this program. Second year in a row, we also received our Library of Excellence. So we are hopefully, this is an honor for us, but we're excited that we are able to provide this for our community. And if you all don't know, our book returns, which you see the replacement of aging book returns, we have 5 outdoor returns. And if any of those 5 are ever not in service, we get calls daily until we open them back up. So we have one that's aging to the point where the weather stripping is really bad, so we have to close it sometimes because if it starts to rain, the materials will get damaged. So we're about to replace that one. So this is good because all 5 of our book returns now will be in service at all times. Oh, sorry. And as Jesus mentioned, I'm just going to briefly touch on just a few of our metrics here. You know, a lot of things that we as librarians, and just as what we do, we track a lot of usage, but some of the things I wanted to highlight are just circulation and just showing that we are still a community that is, our community still love our physical materials. So you'll see that our physical material circulations are there, but since 2010, we launched our first ebook collection where we saw 1,000+ circulations, but as you can see, this year is projected to have 55,000 checkouts. So you can see our community is getting there, and we just continue to see growth. But again, our community is a physical collection. They prefer that over digital right now. And then foot traffic and program attendance. As you can see, our numbers keep climbing when it comes to foot traffic. We are seeing that. If the numbers of this summer and our tenants have showed us anything, is that people are coming back into the library and using us. And the projections show that we will just continue to see growth there. Our programs, there was a dip in 2023, but again, we're seeing tremendous usage within just how people are using the library and coming into the library and participating in programs. And one more thing, you did see the library card holders, there is a slight decline. It's still projected to go down a little bit because people use the library differently. Before, you had to have a library card to use our technology. Now we see a big spike in Wi-Fi, but you don't need a library card to use our internet. So we're still seeing a lot of people come in and use the library. It just looks different. So that's why there is a reflection in card holders. And then efficiencies. Some things that we wanted to highlight from this year was we did reconfigure the service desk. If y'all have probably heard us say this several times, that square footage, we are running out of space just of how we use the building. So what we did was we cut our service desk in half, which still we were able to provide just the same amount of service and great service. But we have now the front of the building, the front of the library, to have more seating, just more space to do more flexible things in the area. And then in fiscal year 2023, we received a reimbursement for just over $42,000 for our interlibrary loan system. So as you all know, we are accredited libraries. So that means that we are able to receive grants for the pickup locker and different types of things. And because of that, we were able to apply for this reimbursement grant. And it continues to grow, as you can see, from 2022. And what that shows is that we sent out over 6,000 library books, our books, to other libraries in Texas. And because of that, TSLAC granted us that $42,000 back into our fund, and that goes back into the general fund. I have been told by other people in the through Texas State Library and Archives Commission that Victoria Public Library is one of the biggest lenders. We have a very sophisticated system, so we get stuff in and out of the building pretty quickly. And I think that just our reimbursement right there shows just how good our process is. And with that, the grant with the Anytime Pickup Locker, it was $43,000. Not only were we able to get that locker, but we were able to purchase a self-management wand. What that is that my team can go with this wand and go through the stacks, and it shows you where books are out of place, misplaced, and just not in the right areas. You probably don't know this, but a lot of time is spent looking for materials, because people will say, well, I returned that book. Well, sometimes it's not in the right place. So my team has to spend a few hours a day looking for things. So this right here not only streamlines just our processes, but cuts time in trace and materials. And again, this was part of the grant that we secured for the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. So new initiatives, things that you will see in the budget request for the library is a configuration of the AV equipment. We do have speakers and speakers that are wired in the broadcast room, but right now we don't have the control panel that can operate the system. So we're hoping to work with IT to get a vendor to install this equipment for us. We do anticipate that once this equipment is installed, our Bronte room would be more, I would say, more in demand, because it would have a full surround sound system in it. Our self-check kiosk machine that we've also requested, we have a 10-year-old self-check machine. If you all have not seen it, it's a kind of a dinosaur. It looks like a big ATM machine. It is at the end of life. It's 10 years old. It's very finicky and works when it wants to. And it no longer takes software updates. So we get through it. But we're requesting a funding to replace it with a new tabletop self-checkout machine. And again, this will not only save some of the footprint of the library, but at the same time, these new machines have better software, things like that, and a quick return. So not only do we have checkouts for our team that will have 3 checkouts, but our patrons can come in and check out items on their own as well. And we are requesting funding for a new 3D printer. We have 2 of them right now. One of them, again, is at the end of life. It's 9 years old. It sounds kind of weird saying, well, how can it's 9 years old, end of life? It no longer, we can't buy replacement parts for it anymore, and it's hobbling along. But over the last couple of years, we've seen so much popularity with the machines. I did provide y'all all with a 3D print object, because sometimes people are like, how do things get 3D printed? Well, we gave y'all one just so y'all can see. But again, this is just to replace one of the ones that we have that we can no longer update or get replacement parts for. All right, sorry, my scrolly is doing its own thing. Okay, so the library budget equals just over $2.5 million, which is with an increase of just over $120,000 compared to last fiscal year. The budget does include over $109,000 in one-time expenses. And I just wanted to highlight that of the $2.5 million, 58% is personnel, 32% is maintenance and operations, and 10% is capital. I will try not to throw James under the bus again, right here. But out of the $109,000, you'll see that the increase is due to technology charges, reoccurring capital due to purchasing more library materials. Some of the one-time costs is the office machinery, updated server, HVAC unit, and the installation of the AV equipment in the Bronte room it's included in that one time. And we will go into all these numbers, but they are there for you if for later reference you'd like to see them. So some of the highlights, some of the things that we're looking at for 2025 and beyond, we are hoping to expand partnerships for learning workshop series with the library, enhancing summer sponsorships for larger summer reading prizes and enhancing programs. Again, we've done that this year, and I'm hoping that in our annual budget annual presentation, you'll see the numbers are reflective of those changes. Find opportunities to enhance spaces like we do with the service desk. And next year, the library, the building itself and where the library turns 50 years old. So we're hoping to celebrate that. I mean, I looked into buying a big hat for the building, but I don't know if it's gonna work out. But we're gonna look at some ways to celebrate. So thank you all for the opportunity to go over the library's budget, and let me know if you have any questions.
I have one question. The card holders,
Yes, sir.
are those all physical cards?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any plans to issue digital cards at any time in the future?
As of right now, we do have an online library card where you can have one. It's temporary, it's a 3-month, so that you have access to a digital library card for that amount of time, and gives you time to come in to actually get just us hand you the physical card.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We saw the numbers regarding circulation. How many books do we have in circulation? How do those numbers play out? Is there and certainly we can look at this later, but is there a budget line for purchasing new print materials?
Yes, let me go back to, let me find that line. So is it right here, capital? So is that right, 196?
You click it again.
Oh, okay, yes. I knew it was there somewhere. So right here, the book line, the 195, that is the budget for our collection, physical collection.
And how many do we have in collection currently comparative? Because it looks like, based on the foot traffic coming in, that's been consistent. So do we have consistent collateral for that? Do we have the print materials? Or is there a decrease? I'm just curious.
Well, I can get you the specific number, but I want to say we have over 100,000 items, physical items in the building. Again, it's all different format. It's books, it's magazines, it's playaways, it's books on CD, books on audio, video games, DVDs, movies. There's a lot of different items, but if you want a breakdown, I could get one more specifically for you for what is in each collection itself. Yes, we do we track everything. So I can get you those numbers specifically, but I would say it's over 100,000 physical items in the building.
So with those other physical items, is there another line item for that outside of the books area, or is it?
Yes, electronic subscriptions, that is a separate line.
Okay.
And that is for all of our e-collections, which is our Overdrive, Hoopla, and of course, and OneCloud. That's a separate line because that's our digital collection. And those items, we do buy licenses, but they go away. So like after a year, that's it. These items, the physical items that we have until we get rid of them.
And this is probably a non-question, and James is probably going to prickle at this, but if we have filtering in place for access, but we don't have to have a library card to access, how are we protecting ourselves legally from someone that might try and access sites that shouldn't be accessed, that are inappropriate sites? So perhaps there's a Wi-Fi, James is already standing up, there's probably a Wi-Fi password, but do we have filtering in place? And if they're not required to use a library card to access the internet, how do we monitor who's utilizing that?
Our system, our Wi-Fi does have a filtering system in it. It's within it, so it's not just open.
Okay.
At all. We have a SIPA agreement, which is a governmental, a grant-funded agreement where we have to have filtering on the system. So it does give you access, but yes, there is filtering to it.
And is there a way then to implement so that we could track library usage versus those that are just accessing? Through entering a library card number?
I can provide you the Wi-Fi number, yes, because we do track that monthly of the Wi-Fi logins, which is about 20,000 a month.
I just thought it would be good because you made mention before that it doesn't require a library card to access. And so you're tracking the number of accesses, but are we tracking whether it's truly through library usage or, for lack of a better way of stating it, back in the day when you would pull up next to Starbucks just to access their Wi-Fi, is it traffic to the library? Is it somebody that possesses a library card that's accessing the
Sometimes
library
it is,
internet?
sometimes it's not, but it's the same concept and the same thing as like pulling up to a Starbucks is just providing Wi-Fi access.
Okay.
Ours is just probably more filtered than most.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Ms. Berger.
Thank you.
Mr. Garza, are we going back to Mr. Weller, or are we moving forward?
No, we are not. We're pushing forward. Yeah. and so I
Sorry,
think-
Roger.
Tough
Yeah.
out there, man. Tough out there.
It's tough.
So Tiffany will come up and hit on municipal court, and this will begin the public safety theme with police and fire following her, and then we'll grab lunch.
Great.
All right. Well, hello. Good morning. I believe it's still morning. Mayor and council. I am excited to present the municipal court budget to you all. So the municipal court strives to provide professional court services to following all laws and ensuring that the rights of persons are protected and observed. So we handle all the cases that come from the police department, but we also get cases from fire marshal's office, code enforcement, Victoria County Animal Services, and through citizen complaints. So people can also come up to the court and file individual complaints as well. The City of Victoria focuses on three main functions: court service, customer service, court operations, and administrative functions. The municipal court org chart is featured here. You have the municipal court judge is one of the city council appointed positions. As a court of record, which we did become a court of record in June of 2021, the municipal court does report judicially to the judge. So she oversees all judicial functions and then administratively report into the city manager's office for all other administrative and day-to-day functions. And then you have our court staff here below, court operations supervisor, and then we have 3 clerk positions, and one of those being a juvenile case coordinator or case manager. These are a couple of photos of our staff. So the mission of our department, the City of Victoria Municipal Court strives to serve every individual with respect and upholds the principles of justice for the betterment of our community. The goals and objectives are to provide access to justice, providing strategic and operational direction for the operations of the municipal court to ensure access to justice and timeliness in case processing, ensuring to leverage innovative solutions to expand court services and enhancing process efficiencies, and community outreach, enhancing public safety and quality of life for Victoria residents and visitors through community outreach initiatives and community partnerships. So these are some of our highlights here. So access to justice initiatives that we had, ongoing outreach and open docket efforts. So this is something that our judge is very big on. Some of the things that she likes to do that we have done for the last few years has been creative docketing. And so what that means is we go out into the community and hold court. We host court in the evening, virtually through Zoom once a month, to allow different ways for people to attend docket. So that's one of the big initiatives that I wanted to highlight. We did have the spring internship collaboration with UHV in collaboration with the Library and City Attorney's Office to complete the legal resource webpage and flyer that was presented to you all. And then a continued partnership with Billy T. Catan Recovery Outreach Center. So some of our impaired offenses are referred to Billy T. Catan, and they provide classes for some of our defendants to help provide services to them. Some of our staff member accomplishments related to our process improvement efficiencies. We did have Maria Bell recognized during a annual conference this past year. Tara Tinney, who serves as our juvenile case manager, obtained her level 1 clerk certification, and David Baker completed the City of Victoria Leadership Academy this past May. We do have several different funds that we oversee, one of those being the Child Safety Fund, and I'll go over that actually next week a little bit more in detail. And so under this category here, I highlight some of those initiatives related to the Child Safety Fund itself. And so one of the big initiatives is the annual child safety grants. And so in this current fiscal year, there were 7 child safety grants awarded, totaling $50,710. Through this program, we also host car seat events throughout the year. We've held one so far this year with another one coming up in September. And a booster seat initiative in Hopkins Elementary Camp in partnership with Texas A&M AgriLife. The court also was awarded its 4th consecutive award for the Municipal Traffic Safety Initiatives for its impaired driving efforts in educating the public, specifically related to the mock trial efforts that Judge Heinold helps to oversee. And then later this in the fall, we will be hosting another technician class for the car seat program. The performance metrics here, the one I really wanted to highlight here is our incoming versus our disposed cases. The red line here on top are our incoming cases. The goal would be ideally that we're disposing more, but we're closing the gap here. So if you highlight over those numbers, you can kind of see the difference there. We do try our best to get updated contact information for folks to help get them to appear. We utilize different skip tracing softwares to try and get contact information to try to help get them to appear in court. And so that's kind of what that is there. And down below, you'll see descriptions of the different metrics there. Some of our efficiencies in this year's budget, implementing of electronic warrant management through the court's case management system. Our goal, especially going into the public safety headquarters next year, is to not have physical copies of the warrant. So we're in the process now. Dispatch and records staff for the police department recently got trained on utilizing our system. So we're working towards utilizing our court system to be able to manage those through that case management system. And then streamlining our pretrial processes for the prosecutor. He is recently transitioning to using that electronically only versus paper physical copies. And so that's one way for us to, that has helped save staff time and money. Some of our new programs and initiatives, there is a new youth diversion program that the legislation session for that actually, it goes into effect in January. And so we will be implementing that with the new year and expanding some of our community partners as it's related to that youth diversion program. And so we do have some special funds related to that we're able to offset some of those expenditures for that. That's another line item that we're able to utilize. And those funds are from, it's a fee that's assessed on citations, and that's all through the court costs that are assessed by state law. And so that is a fund that we utilize to help offset the costs related to that. There's also upcoming grant opportunities we'll be applying for, but we don't currently have any awarded grants for that opportunity. And then we'll be implementing trial court performance measures using core tools, which are the National Center for State Court Standards in this next year, to really help better measure some of our metrics as we move forward. And then preparing for the move to the new facility as the completion of the public safety headquarters will be happening later this year. So the municipal court department budget request equals $522,160, an increase of $7,250 or 1.41% compared to fiscal year '24, which was $514,910. There were no one-time expenditures, and it is the same again from last year because there's no one-time. Of the budget amount of $522,160, 73% is for personnel, 26% for maintenance and operations, and 1% for capital. Our department has actually had a personnel decrease. It was, and I'll show you down below, but due to baseline adjustments. And so that was $9,749 in baseline adjustments and $8,005 for the fiscal year pay program. There was a maintenance increase due to software maintenance. We did have some of our annual maintenance go up. We did not add any additional software this year. It just had some increases. Some of ours went up a certain percent. And then there were also some IT expenditure increases as well. And then our overall capital expenditures did decrease due to the number of computer replacements being reduced. And so here, just to show you again, personnel costs for municipal court did decrease by $1,744. Maintenance and operations here, $11,294, and that was due mostly to software maintenance, which is that $6,000 here. The interdepartmental one here, that's mostly the IT. And then here's that capital decrease in reduced number of computer replacements. And then we have the fiscal year '25 and beyond programs. I've been utilizing Power BI, but I really want to, as we implement those core tools and those court metrics going forward, I want to be able to use that Power BI dashboard to build that out. The image here is kind of the court in the future, if you will. That is a cloud-based system, so moving away. We're currently on an old server here locally on our software, and so being able to move to more of a cloud-based system to be able to manage our software with our existing platform. So looking to move to that in the future, implementing an online juror management, and then evaluating court translation services maybe through uses of some of those AI-driven technologies. So that's moving forward into the future, looking at what some of those things might look like. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? All right. Thank you, Ms. Toda. Appreciate it. Well done.
All right.
Moving on into.
Yeah, we'll move on and we'll just continue
Chief.
on that schedule on there. So Chief Young will come up and present the police department.
Very good. Welcome, Chief.
Well, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Chuck Young. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Victoria. And I'm here to talk about, on behalf of the men and women of the department, I'm here to tell you about the 2025 annual budget report for the police department. As you can see in the department, I'm just going to go straight to the organizational chart. Oh, come on now. And what it shows on the left side of the page, our department is made up of 167, that's the assigned strength, 167 people. Currently, we have, it's 36 civilians and 131 licensed personnel. Currently, we have 14 positions that are available for the licensed side and 3 positions on the non-sworn side, so 14 and 3, which gives us about 150 men and women of the department currently. As you see on the organizational chart, you can see for yourself, the left side of the house is the operational side, and that's Deputy Chief Fetters. Captain Turner is the operations captain, and basically the patrol, the investigatory, and Company C, which makes up the highway interdiction, et cetera. And I won't bore you with the makeup of the department. It's just that you can see this chart. All of the operational components are on the left-hand side. The support services side of the house, the right side, is Deputy Chief Moya. Kevin Sanderson is the port services captain, and then on that side of the house is communications, records, et cetera. But the main departmental mission is obviously to reduce crime and the fear of crime through outstanding police service and partnership with our community. It's very, very simple. We are here to serve the community, and one of the ways that we do that is to respond to priority 1 calls in a short period of time. Our goal is 6 minutes. We're actually at 4 minutes, 13 seconds currently what we're responding to the priority 1 calls. A priority 1 call, we'll talk about it in a minute, but priority 1 calls are the major car accidents, the shootings, the stabbings, critical incidents where property crime or life expenditure is a big situation. You have a major accident, we worry about people in there that are hurt. A shooting call, we're worried about getting there in a timely manner to help the injured people. Another one of our to reduce crime is obviously a large item. Shows on here to reduce it by 3%. Well, that's a conservative figure. Last year, we were at about 16% reduction overall. Currently, we are at about a 28% reduction in violent crime. So we're doing very well compared to last year, and last year was a flat year. The year before that was a great year. So crime is going the right direction. If we're worried about that, crime is going in the right direction. One of the things that I'm trying to implement is the Real-Time Crime Center. You've heard me talk about that a lot. For the new members, the Real-Time Crime Center is basically an intelligence center that information comes in from different departments, and information goes out to the other departments. You take information in, you monitor the radio, you quickly work on a license plate number, you work on a suspect, and you try to provide information to the rest of the department to try to find the offender. Our automated fingerprint identification system is another goal. It's to streamline a little bit on the timeliness of having it go to a lab for analysis. We're able to analyze them a little bit quicker and a little bit more in-house, which is faster. Gets us to the suspect, which helps the investigatory process, put their hands on the offender, and if need be, put them in jail. The vacancy rate is something that we've already talked about. We're 14 and 3. That's something that we're trying to work on. But recruiting and retaining and training is all a component, but it's a goal and objective of the department. Organize of the community events. This is a strong thing in this community. I'll talk about it in just a second, but our partnerships with the community is outstanding. Some of the things that we've done with our agency, and I'll talk about it in a second, but it's we can't do it without the community's help. We can't do it without their support. And the whole objective is to reduce crime and maintain a better quality of life in the town. Maintain the investigative case overall is 40%. That's our goal. We're currently at 56% on the clearance rate, and with the national average is 45.6, so we're doing well on that as well. The highlights, this has got a real hair trigger here, sorry. Obviously is to create partnerships with the community. A lot of the things that we're doing is the lunch and learn, and we can't do this without the community support. We can't do it without their involvement. We can't do it without their helping. But we have lunch and learn, which is a collaboration with the fire department. For the last 2.5 years, we've been doing a lunch and learn. It's grown to about 80 participants. We'll do anything from hands-free CPR to the basic use of a smartphone. They're sponsored lunches. We try to do one of those a month. The Up and Coming Female Leadership Conference is to help develop young women and to overcome some of the professional barriers that they may have. Currently, we have of our 150 police personnel, we have 14 that are sworn members, and 28 are professional staff members, and we aim to improve those numbers. Feature successful women from various fields as speakers in our 4-day conference. We're going to include Constance Philly Johnson. Dr. Ashley Everett is going to be one of the speakers on July 17th. So if you want some more information for that, I'll be happy to provide it for you. But it's the Up and Coming Female Leadership Conference. Camp Cameron just concluded yesterday. Very, very well received. Offers kiddos from 10 to 14 the opportunity to learn about the police. Other than seeing the police in a crisis, they are able to see the department in a great light. It's an educational process for them, and it's named after, the camp has been going, the youth camp has been going on for 5 years. The last 2 years it's been called Camp Cameron after Cameron Lee, who is a member who is an honorary police officer with our department, as you probably know. She passed away from sarcoma July of 22. Casting with Cops, it's another great community involvement project. The Victoria Police Foot Pursuit and the Donut Dash. It's just another one of the fun little things that we're trying to do. The Health Awareness Patch Program. As you can see here, each one of these patches represents an illness that's in our community, it's in our department, and each of these patches represent a different ailment or illness or awareness program that we're trying to promote as a department and as a community. So you see on here, you see this video last year won 3rd place in the very long Texas Association of Telecommunications Officers Government Programming Awards. Well, that won 3rd place last year. But I'm going to play for you a real fast version of this year's submission, and I hope I don't mess it up.
What a day. So what are y'all gonna be for Halloween?
It is a black river.
Perhaps it is not too deep. Tis firm! Tis firm as stone!
Hey, get out of the road. Hello there. I'm Officer Turner with Victoria Police Department's Community Engagement Unit. Halloween is just around the corner, and we'd like to give you a few simple tips to keep you and your children safe while trick-or-treating. Wear costumes that are bright and easily seen, or have children carry glow sticks or flashlights. Make sure that costumes fit well to avoid tripping and that masks don't block your child's vision. A parent or other trusted adult should always accompany children. Any older children should always stay in groups. Never dart out from between cars and always cross at a crosswalk. Don't go to houses that aren't well lit, and remember to check any candy before eating. Drivers are always encouraged to take a little extra time and watch out for children that are out and about. And one more thing, don't be playing in the street. On behalf of the Victoria Police Department, we wish everybody a happy and safe Halloween.
From all of us witches, have a happy Halloween!
I'm sorry. But anyway, James, how do I get out of this now? Please.
There goes the whole mood.
This one? Oh my gosh, look at that. Yeah. So that's our submission for this current. It's just another play, tongue in cheek, give the opportunity, give the city, give the population, the city attendants, the city members, a chance to see the department from, to learn from it, to learn from a safety aspect, and to know that we are human. Yep, thank you, sir. Okay. So some of the benchmarks or the parameters that I'm trying to show is if you look at the first column, and what this is it's dispatch and police overtime compared to the average vacancies. What I wanted to show is that our attrition level, our vacancy level is important, and it relates to the amount of overtime that's expended. As you can see in the 2020, we had 11 openings. Now, these are yearly averages. When I came into here this morning, it was 15 and 2 as far as sworn and non-sworn. And I've learned since we've come in, we've hired some folks. Some folks have not completed the academy for the various reasons. So it's a give and take. It's a plus and minus. But right now we're sitting at 14 vacancies. On the far side, our average of 2024, I want to say that shows 20. Yeah, it shows 20.38. So as you can see, the number of vacancies is relative to the amount of overtime that is being spent. All right, so the next chart, I can talk about numbers ad nauseum, but the bottom line is the folks, because of our vacancies, are working harder. The investigators are 50%, they're working 50, the caseload is 50% greater than it was compared to 2024 as it is in 24 compared to 23. So how did we come up with that number? We took a detective and labeled them assault detective 1, 2, 3, property crime, et cetera. And we're taking that position and finding out how many cases they were assigned to this year, last year, and that's how we're able to determine the extra workload that they're actually doing. The next performance measurement is the crime. Crime is down, and it's the secondary chart is if you look at the chart on the left, it's the orange and it says 1723. Well, that's for the 2023 numbers. If you look at our overall numbers of the year in crime, the crime comparison, it was very much flat last year compared to the year before. I think what our increase was about 13 offenses, which was represents about 17%, and that was auto theft. So auto thefts across the country are up, and it's not any different in the city of Victoria. The Part 1 crimes, just so you know, are the murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. The property crimes are are also part of the Part 1, but they are burglary, theft, and auto theft. So that's what the chart on the left represents. As you see on the right, the overall Part 1 crimes from 2018 to current is if you look at the bottom number, and that's the significant part, is that's where the 264 are the violent crimes. That's down from the 281, that's down from the 375. So at the rate that we're going right now, realistically, and I don't want to jinx anything, but we're looking for another increase. Currently, in our violent crime, we're at about 28% crime reduction year to date right now than we were last year, and last year was a flat year. So the men and women of the department are doing great. They're doing a hardworking job. Their investigatory follow-up is phenomenal, as you can see in our clearance rate. What is the big item? And that is car burglaries. And you all have heard me talk about it before. You've heard me talk about it a lot. But that number one crime down there on the bottom is the purple represents the car BMVs, burglary of a motor vehicle, and the top number represents the number of handguns that were stolen. We're at the same pace that we were last year. 1 out of 10 in 2023, we had, I think it's 1.71 car burglaries, had a pistol taken out of it. And currently, right now, we're at about 0.9, so we're averaging almost one for one. So we're on the same pace that we were last year. We just have to work on that. And then the last matrix, the last chart we have is the response time. We've already talked about that. 4.22 is actually equates to 4 minutes, 13 seconds in our priority one. The hot calls, we're getting there faster than we have in previous years. How is that even happening with our numbers? We're paying more attention to small ball. What that means is we're paying attention to the detail. If it comes out as a major accident with injuries, it comes out as a hot call. That's a priority one call. Perhaps we learn that there were no serious injuries. It was just, to say it that way, a minor accident and a fender bender. Well, that will change the priority one call status. And we're paying a little bit more attention to that. In years gone by, if you look at 2018, 19, maybe it wasn't as emphasized as it has been the last couple years, but we're really paying attention. Did it really happen the way it was reported? If not, we make an adjustment. You look at the crashes, which is the chart on the right. 2021 to right now, we've had probably a 20% reduction in crashes. And that's because it's having officers visibility out in and trying to do a deterrent. It's just, I mean, you're not gonna run a stop sign, you're not gonna run a red light if you see a marked police car. It's obvious. So having more of that uniform presence, more people out there is going to reduce crime. So we've already talked about what the part ones are. We've talked about that. We talk about our efficiencies of the department. Efficiencies of the department are right here. We assigned a desk person, and the desk person also is the municipal court bailiff. It also provides, the desk officer also provides a little bit of security for the records clerks up front. They are the first line inside of the current police building. She is a one-woman show, and it's Sherry Hornstein, and she's answered actually almost 1,500 calls for service in the last year. So an efficiency is we have the walk-ins. The public doesn't have to wait and take the time for an officer to come in off the streets. Sherry's already there to talk to them. 288 offenses is what she made. She's made 947 callbacks. 523 of these were walk-ins. She's documented in just miscellaneous incident reports 135 different incidents. So it's very important. Sherry does a great job in the front, and also, again, she substitutes as the municipal court bailiff. The cold case lieutenant is a position that we created last year. When it came time to do some promotions, I forego promoting an additional captain, and I promoted an additional lieutenant so we could have a new cold case lieutenant. And he's done a great job. He really has. And it gives the opportunity to look at some of the unsolved cases, go back, fresh set of eyes. You know, we all watch television. We all know what a cold case is. But, you know, he's able to determine that actually using the technology that we have, he's actually able to find that we had an offense that happened 25 years ago in a place where the other person was found is not where that person was killed. It was killed in a different place. And we've able to do that with the technology. He is able to focus on that activity and is able to more focus on it instead of working the day-to-day cases like the other investigators are. And then lastly, we're getting grants through our license plate readers. We all know about that. We've talked about that ad nauseum. But it's just another technological piece, another efficiency. It's a force multiplier. We're trying to bring new technology, and one of those new technological pieces is the license plate readers. So I'm sorry I'm going through stuff really fast, but time crunch, right? Real-time crime center, we know about that. I want to be a lead agency for the Crossroads area and be a real-time crime center informational source and hub. Implementing Blue in the school. Its nickname is BITS. And it allows for the uniformed officer, just somewhat similar to the community events that we go to, is I don't want an interaction from a young child to be the first time that they ever come into contact with a uniformed police officer is in a crisis. I want them to be able to interact with us in a more comfortable setting. And Blue in the School, we've talked about this before, but we actually go into the schools and we teach. Right now, we're actually going to start in the fall at OLV, and we're going to teach uniformed police officers 1 hour a week, 4 sessions, honesty, integrity, respect, caring, fairness. Some of the things that we may get at home, but we may not, but we're going to reinforce that in our schools. And the last item is, you'll notice in one of the charts, one of the efficiency charts, we talk about juvenile crime. Juvenile crime is on a little bit of an uptick compared to the last couple of years. And we've actually have a dedicated sergeant. I've reassigned a sergeant to work on juvenile crime. And the juvenile is a 12 or 13-year-old that's out in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, tugging on doors, on car doors, going to be a car burglar, and find that pistol that we've talked about a minute ago. And they're actually going to find these guns. So we have a sergeant that's going to focus on the younger 13, 14, 15, 16. Now we're getting into adult at 17, but it's that younger person. And Sergeant Grifaldo has been tasked with that position. If we have a crime involving a younger person, Grifaldo is going to be working on that. So now we talk to the budget highlights. The combined police and dispatch budget request this year is $18 million. Which is an increase of $642,000 or a 3.7% increase compared to last year's $17,300,000. Fiscal year 2025 budget includes $528,000 in one-time expenses, and $17,500,000 in recurring costs, which is an increase of 2.42% or $413,000 from last year's recurring budget. Of the $18,032,000, 78% is for personnel, 20% for M&O, and 2% for capital. As you can see on here, the personnel increases is due to $387,000 in baseline adjustments, $421,000 in fiscal year market step plan, and $73,000 for the 2025 general population pay program. Notable one-time expenditures are software increases of $87,000, IT departmental charges of $63,000, and you can see on and on, replacements for $100,000 of computers, and the license plate reader software and maintenance warranties is an increase of $20,000. Our notable one-time expenses for the data migration of the New World software, which kind of ties back to the Cole case. It's some of the older process of the collection of evidence, the collection of the data, et cetera, is in a system, and New World software of $125,000 is going to allow us to access that older stuff. Replacement of portable Motorola radios for $217,000, and a capital replacement charges of the vehicle equipment and installation of $147,000. So that's kind of it. I will talk about the one item at the 2025 and beyond. The new public safety headquarters building is obviously something that's extremely important to all of us. The real-time crime center and its implementation, and then of course Blue in the School. And to continue all of the good stuff that we've done with the community for the last several years, we're going to keep doing those 2025 and beyond. Yes, sir. Any questions? I know it's a lot of data, and I'm sorry I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but I could talk about this for hours.
And I'll just add that the expense for the radios is something that you can expect to see over the course of the next few years, because we're having to upgrade and replace all of our radios because the existing one, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in how I word this, has reached end of life, in essence. And so oftentimes what happens is that these companies that produce this type of equipment or software, end up just reaching an end of life and in essence forcing customers to upgrade every so often. And we've come upon one of those times where we're being forced to upgrade our radios because our existing ones are not going to be able to be serviced anymore. And it's such a large expense because we have so many. How many radios do we have overall across the city, James?
Across the city, how many radios?
For across the city, we have over 600, but for just police and fire alone is 400 radios at an average cost of $9,000 per radio.
So that's significant, and so our only play is to try and split the cost of those radios over a 3-year period is our goal.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I can't read lips.
All right, thank you,
Yeah,
Chief.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
I have one.
Oh.
Just out of curiosity, I didn't see an expenditure for furniture for the new public safety building. Where would that be? Because you guys are going to have to furnish it, right?
That's a great question. So all of the money associated with that project has already been encumbered.
Okay.
Yeah, just FYI, the whole project is about $50 million, $52 million. The contract to build is around 40. There's a soft cost, what we call it, for furniture and stuff like that. That still has not been an expense yet, but it's accounted for in the budget.
And no expenditure for new cars needed?
That would have been under Rogers,
Under Rogers?
but yeah, you can hit on it or you can step up and hit on it and get your 5 seconds.
Told you I'd get you in here, Roger. No, just
Bagpipes
kidding.
over here.
Roger Welder.
Thank you for getting your joke in.
Yeah, I wanted to say it so bad. So right now, we're not looking at leasing or purchasing any new vehicles for the upcoming fiscal year, basically due to the decrease in revenue.
And currently,
Well, let's be factual. Replacement of these vehicles, and when we can put $400,000 in there, we're not getting them in.
Right.
So it's a timing issue.
so also talk about what's in the works right now.
For police?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have 5 Tahoes that we ordered last year that are finally going to start showing up. We have one already here. It's an administrative type vehicle with the drone specific equipment so they can fly their drone. We also have another admin car coming and 3 K9 vehicles that will be allocated to the Highway Interdiction Program. We also have 6 Patrol Explorers ordered that will be in hopefully before October 1st. So we have 11 total that will be replaced this year.
Thank you. Just curious.
Yeah. Great. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Well, then,
All right, so-
we go from chief to chief?
Yeah, we do, yeah. We can do the fire presentation and then break for lunch, or break for lunch now and then do fire. Up to you, Mayor. We anticipate his presentation being equal in length.
Let's
He,
go.
he looks ready to go. Let's
Okay.
let's
Well,
get-
he should
let's get Chief done, and then
be
we can break for
refreshed.
lunch.
He should
Yeah.
be
He
refreshed.
enjoy his lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. How are you?
How are you doing?
Doing well.
So, good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is George Gomez. I am the Fire Chief for Victoria Fire Department, and I'm here to share our story and our 2025 budget. So, our department is a community-oriented all-hazards department. Our goal is to enhance the quality of life for those we serve, providing a wide range of services from fire suppression, hazardous materials mitigation, and emergency medical services. And this includes the city as well as the county of Victoria. It roughly covers approximately 900 square miles. We average approximately 13,000 incidents a year. Since 2016, we've accumulated several awards. A couple of the more distinguished awards the department has received is the Texas Fire Chiefs Association Best Practice designation. This is a very prestigious award that is reviewed on our policies and procedures, our firefighter safety, the level of service that we deliver to the community. And out of all of the departments in the state of Texas, only 30 can claim that, and Victoria Fire is one of them. The other distinguished award is the American Heart Association's Mission Gold Life Heart Attack designation. Again, that is looking at policies, procedures, best practices in a pre-hospital setting, and we've received that award as well. Our department consists of 130 members, 128 uniform, 2 civilian. And as you can see, here is the organizational chart, basically having a fire marshal, fire inspection, investigation division, EMS operations, fire operations, as well as an administration division. So our mission, of course, is to preserve life, property, and with dedicated and caring service. The goals and the objectives are committed to serving our city, the residents, and the visitors with professionalism, dedication, and compassion. We are dedicated to improving our department's efficiency and effectiveness, and we constantly want to maintain a high level of operational readiness through implementation of new technologies, best practices, and better utilize our resources to provide the best possible care for the community. The community engagement is always important to us, and we are involved in various events, and this gives us an opportunity to promote fire safety programs and increase awareness with fire safety and medical emergencies. We continue our recruitment strategies to lower vacancies within the department and thus lowering the overtime. So for 2024 highlights, we enhanced our training capabilities by installing a confined space training prop as well as a car prop that simulates car fires at our training facility. We've developed a partnership with Magnolia Fire Department. Basically, they provide the EMT training up as part of our fire academy. Our Citizens Fire First Responder Academy this past year had over 40 participants, and the interest is growing. We're having a lot of citizens that are really interested in being a part of this program. Our Fire Training Academy itself, we've just recently graduated 13 members. 6 of them have committed to work for Victoria Fire. With that, we actually had 125 applicants since, and for the next academy. And so we're looking at how we can grow this and how we can develop our own to serve the community. The hands-only CPR initiative has been successful. It's a big hit. We are looking at, hopefully at the end of the 2024 year, that we'll train over 2,000 people with hands-only CPR. So just want to share just a couple of things, our performance metrics. This is something pretty simple. Basically, it outlines the responses that we had from the past couple of years. And as you can see, about 21% is responses into the county, and it's pretty consistent over the last 2 or 3 years. Let's see. So this is all of our units, and you can see all of our units are utilized for the emergencies that we encounter. We basically want to I had mentioned before that we respond to 13,000 incidents, but that actually translates to about 19,000 responses. And what I mean by that is if you have, let's say, a situation where someone calls for a heart attack, you're going to get, that's one incident, but you're going to get 3 responses. You're going to get a EMS officer responding, you're going to get an ambulance responding, and you're also going to get a heavy apparatus responding to that incident. And the other thing that we measure or we look at is we call it, right now it's captured in hours, but what it is, it's a unit hour utilization is what we look at. And what we try to achieve is we monitor our apparatuses and see what the exact utilization, as far as percentage, are they being used. There's a threshold there that you'd like to be at 30%. Anytime your apparatuses are reaching 30%, you have to start looking at how do we lower that number through adding another resource or coming up with some innovative program to combat that. So 30% is a magic number, because if your apparatus is being used 30%, that means it's available 70% for the next emergency, and that's what you're looking for. You want that availability. Of course, you want to be using all your apparatuses, you want them to be fully functional and being utilized, but you also want them to have a level of readiness and to be available for the next emergency. So those are things that we measure. Okay. So for the efficiencies, last year we launched the community paramedic program, and it's been very successful. In case you don't know what this program is we actually have a paramedic that reviews run reports, takes references from our medics out in the field, and we identify those members of the community that are dependent on calling 911. And what the community paramedic does is she reaches out to local organizations and see what kind of services that they can provide, and then reaches out to the member that is calling 911 a lot and sees how can we mitigate and how can we be the connection to solving their issues and problems, and not necessarily just calling us just to take them to the hospital. What this does is it reduces the members' dependency on 911, and it also increases our availability for the next emergency by keeping our resources in place. We have done some reorganization to enhance the safety of our members and better address the community needs. We are addressing and continually we are tweaking and shoring up our leave procedures to reduce the overtime. Oops. And here recently, we participated in an aviation exercise here at the airport. It's an FAA standard that we are part of an exercise every 3 years. What this allows us is it allows us to measure our capability in our service if we were to encounter such an emergency. Through this, we're able to review our policies, procedures, how we responded, if there's anything we need to shore up to be better at this. Hopefully it's something we'll never encounter, but it's something that we practice once every 3 years. For 2025 initiatives, community engagement is huge for us. We want to be involved with the community. It enhances the fire safety and also the EMS aspect. We are looking to create a community risk reduction program. We've kind of touched surfaces on this with the hands-only CPR, which has been a really big hit. We are actually looking to build off of that program and create a public access defibrillator program, as well as a pulse point program. And basically what this is, the public access defibrillator, is we will be targeting establishments that have defibrillators on their property and noting that the addresses, noting the location. That way, if someone was to call 911, it will show up in the call notes for that address. The dispatcher can say, hey, look, I see there's a defibrillator right there on the first floor by the elevator. Please retrieve that. And at least we can initiate care through the citizens as we're responding. With that comes the Pulse Point program. With those training in the hands-only CPR, we will have a software that you can download onto your phone. And if you're willing to be a participant, when someone calls 911 and we have someone that has gone down, it will alert you if you're nearby and say, we have a person that needs your assistance. And it can alert you and can pinpoint where you need to go to assist. Again, it's using technology, it's using our citizens to initiate care before we can even get there. And we all know that getting on the chest is high priority, and it is it increases the level of survivability in a CPR situation. So these are a couple of programs we are looking to initiate. Another one is the smoke detector blitzes. We are pretty good at being involved in community engagements, and we seek those opportunities to install smoke detectors. But I'd rather be more proactive than reactive. And through this community risk reduction program, we will have more of a structured, coordinated effort that we will identify neighborhoods and go out on Saturday mornings with our members and install and educate smoke detectors. And the goal is to have, by 2026, 90% of the households with working smoke detectors in their home. The other program we're looking at is the special events program. We all know Victoria is a good place to come and visit and have a great time. We've seen this here recently with a couple of events. More importantly, what we want to do at no cost to the city, it's more pushed onto the vendor, having these events, having these concerts, having these sporting events, that there is an EMS presence there at the event. It gives our medics an opportunity to get a lay of the land, people that are involved, and then we have people immediately there if needed. If someone is to go down and they call 911, our dispatchers are aware that we have medics on scene, can notify them, and they can engage quickly rather than being dependent on our actual existing structure of our 911 system and our resources. This also, again, it keeps our resources at bay and available for the next emergency for our citizens. We are also looking to expand and reduce our response times by adding automatic vehicle locators to our heavy apparatuses. We have them right now installed with our ambulances, but with our fire engines, fire trucks, we have EMTs, we have paramedics on those apparatuses. So it only makes sense to add that automatic vehicle locator, which identifies the closest resource to the emergency. So we can get care there quickly and initiate through EMT and our paramedics. And of course, we're always looking at apparatus replacement, and we are starting the planning process to relocate Station 5, which will enhance our, again, service delivery and to our citizens as well. For the 2025 budget highlights, we're requesting a total of just over $16,583,000. This is an increase of $640,000 compared to last year's budget. This is $638,000 is a one-time expense, and the rest is in recurring expenses. So the budget makes up 77% of our personnel, 19% of our maintenance and operations, and then 4% towards capital. Let's see. I think. And again, so for fiscal year 2025 and beyond, we are again looking to relocate and rebuild Station 5, looking to identify a site for Station 7. We are looking to enhance our EMS staffing and then increase our apparatus inventory. This basically concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Chief, can you scroll back up real quick to where it had that table and the verbiage talking about percentage increase compared to last year's budget? Yeah, right there. Can you hit on the, I guess, the second paragraph that's listed on there?
The major impacts?
Yes.
So the major impacts for our budget, it's related to of course, the maintenance of our existing fire stations, our apparatuses, and purchasing emergency response vehicles. Of course, this is all due to, the age of our vehicles, the age of the station, the maintenance, and the inflation that comes along with all that. The biggest thing with us is, of course, we want to make sure we have heating, we have air conditioning for our members. We want to make sure the garage door openers are working, so whenever we need to get out of the station, we have them operating efficiently. And also, of course, we always have plumbing issues and stuff like that. So that's where all the expenses are coming from.
All right, any questions?
Yes, I have one question on that new hires. How many new hires were there?
So we have 6 from the last rookie class of 13 that we hired. And we are constantly looking. We actually had a couple of more hires before that. We're actually down to about 2 vacancies compared to, I believe it was maybe 20 vacancies from last year. But of course, the reality is with this department, and I'm sure Chief Young can speak on this as well, is we're the big department in the region. And people that have an ambition to become firefighters, police officers, where's the best training ground? It's wherever the big city is, wherever you're busiest. And so that's always important. We can we can get them, it's just retaining them. And so that's always an issue for us. And so we're always looking at the recruiting strategies and how are we can get members to join the Victoria Fire Department. I think one of our biggest assets is our training academy. Again, as you could see, we had 125 applicants. We are the only academy in the region. If you would like to get fire training, you would have to go to Houston, San Antonio, Corpus Christi. We are the only training academy in the region. I see a potential where we could really do something really great with that.
Yeah, agreed. Any other questions?
So there's one ambulance replacement, one fire truck replacement. How many vehicles are at end of life currently?
So right now, we're managing about half the fleet. So we have to manage, they're right near end of life, so we have to look at the replacement plan. So usually the rule of thumb on replacing an ambulance is usually every 3 to 4 years, or you're looking at that 100,000 mark. We do have a couple of ambulances that are right there at 90,000, so we have to look at trying to replace one every year, if not every other year. Because also when you look at the cost and maintenance and stuff, sometimes it's just not worth the cost and maintenance rather than just providing another apparatus. And same thing goes for the engines. You're looking at a lifespan of about 8 years, as well as the truck about 10 years.
Chief, just correct me if I'm wrong, but it was my understanding that the pumpers, in addition to the fleet, were keeping their ladder. Ladder was supposed to be replaced. In addition, besides that, the pumper was added
Yes,
to
sir.
relieve that functionality
Yes, sir.
operational.
We do have 2 ladders. Again, if you look at flexibility, timely responses, agility, the pumpers are a lot faster and more agile than the ladder trucks. We are looking to prolong the life of the ladder trucks by not using them as much to respond to the medical emergencies, because that's what we use. It's pretty much all hands on deck. We use every resource. By providing an extra pumper, it enhances our fire suppression capabilities and service coverage for the city, but it helps in extending the life of the ladder.
Roger, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure.
Are you still here?
I'm trying to get you up here, Roger.
So real quick, my only addition to that presentation, which was excellent, by the way, is that we are going to be entering into a maintenance agreement with a company called Siddons Martin. Thanks to the chiefs at the fire department, they initiated the conversation between them, myself, and Siddons. Siddons Martin is an OE equipment supplier and maintenance group for fire apparatus and ambulance specifically. So one of the items in my presentation was that they will be, we're very, very far along. Y'all will be seeing it soon, come to a council meeting, but we'd like to enter a maintenance agreement with them. They're going to move to Victoria. Right now, if anything has to go out for maintenance to Siddons Martin, we have to send it to Corpus or Houston. So we get a lot of excessive downtime from that. So they'll be moving to Victoria. They'll be moving into our location. They'll be stocking a parts room there. And so we'll have original equipment people working on our original equipment. So we should save a lot in downtime. And also with their expertise, we should see some of these things that keep us down for a long time start to get shorter, because they'll catch a lot of this stuff before it actually becomes a problem.
So they're in a better position. I know one of the things we struggle with is getting parts and, having downtime. So they're in a better position to decrease that downtime since they have them just right there available.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're really excited to bring them to the region, because we do have so many volunteer organizations around Victoria, and everybody has to travel to Corpus or Houston to get anything worked on. And so we're hoping that through this partnership, we'll build a relationship with Siddons that they may enter into our marketplace in a more broad manner, so that maybe potentially some of these other agencies will be able to use their services as well.
No, I think that program has a lot of benefits to it, so.
Great, so do I, thanks.
Great.
One of the things too that I think is important to note from the asset vehicle equipment standpoint is that we certainly have, aging fleet, right? I mean, there's definitely a correlation, between aging fleet, and that's just not for public safety, right? I mean, just in general. We do have most of our vehicles on a replacement schedule. However, the facts are that the cost of replacing these vehicles has increased significantly just in the last few years than it had been historically, which makes it that much harder for us to stick to the replacement schedule that is quote unquote ideal. And so, for example, nowadays, if you buy a pumper, brand new off the streets, I mean, you're easily spending $1 million. I mean, that used to be, when I was in Kingsville, we bought one for like 400 grand. And so, an ambulance, you used to be able to get one for a couple $100,000. Now it's easily $500,000. So the cost of replacement of these equipment is just skyrocketing significantly. And so for us, that becomes a challenge because it's not like we have a ton of new revenue coming in every year to be able to keep up with that. And so our challenge is not only is on all fronts. Our challenge is keeping up with the increased cost of replacing equipment and vehicles, but also keeping up with increases in market on the operational side. And so it forces us to have to make decisions about, well, which one's more important? How does this work? And so, for example, you heard that there was no funds in the budget for fiscal year 25 to replace additional police vehicles. Ideally, there's probably 3 apparatuses that need to be replaced for the fire department in fiscal year 25, but we're only replacing 1, I think. But part of that is because we want to spend less money on one-time expenditures in fiscal year 25 so we can pay the pay program to pay our folks more money. We don't have enough money for everything, and so we have to make sacrifices. And so this is an example of one of the sacrifices that is included in the proposed or preliminary budget for fiscal year 25 that prioritizes personnel and prioritizes putting more money towards a recurring expense in wages and less money on one-time expenditures like vehicle replacement. I hope that helps too. So anyway.
All right. Any other questions? All right, Chief Kamasaki.
Yeah, I would just like to real quick just share with you, this is a really great department. They do a lot. I've only been here 5 months, but when I recognized and I saw that Victoria was looking for a new fire chief, researching this department and looking at, they're on the forefront of technology where the paramedics, they use body cam that enhances, our quality assurance and enhances our level of service to the community. This department is one of the first in the nation to do blood transfusions out in the field. And so with the accolades, the awards and stuff, this is a very great department, and I really wanted to be a part of this team. So,
Well, Chief, we're happy you're here and keep up the good work.
thank you, I appreciate it.
You bet. All right,
All right, so that brings us to our lunch break.
sounds good. So do we want to stay on schedule, just break and crank back up at 12? Well, you want to do a 15-minute break?
We are accounting to also possibly not do the IT presentation in the afternoon. And so
Okay.
I think we're safe in just taking a 15, 20-minute lunch break.
Okay.
And we can adjust the afternoon schedule if needed.
All right, well then, let's do a 20-minute break. I think everybody's about wore out. So that put us back at 12:40. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.